Hello, everybody, and welcome to the VoiceOver Network in collaboration with Hindenburg presents a fantastic workshops audiobook demos made easy with Jonathan Hurley from Hindenburg. Hello, Jonathan Hurley from Hindenburg.
Hello, Alan Shires from the VoiceOver Network. And hello, Jane, Richard, and John.
Yeah, hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome. So, guys who are here to observe and to watch, please pop your questions in the chat. We'll keep an eye on the chat for you. And I won't talk any longer because we're not here to listen to me. We're here to listen to Jonathan. So, Jonathan, over to you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Alan, or Rachel is what it looks like now. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much, like I said, to the participants. I want to do one thing first, just before we get going a little bit here, which is just to talk about the raise and lower hand icon. I'm sure everybody's used Zoom a lot these days and all that, but just to go through it. So here's what we're going to do today. And we here at Hindenburg are just really happy about our ongoing participation and collaboration with the VoiceOver Network. And what we wanted to do today was kind of walk you through the real life steps of making a demo for ACX. And we actually just made a few videos on these subjects. We're going to put them into the chat, and then we'll put them into the chat at the end because it's going to go over everything that I go over today. But we wanted to walk you through the parts, and it's kind of going to be separated into three parts. The first part is sort of broad recording, and hopefully I'll answer any questions that come up with that and tech things and that sort of thing. So I thought what we do, and then the next part would be, it'd be like recording a demo. How do you export a selection, stuff like that. The next part would be recording your audition. And then the third part would be like how to transfer those skills into doing the full book, focusing on books here today. Does that sound like it makes sense to everybody? All right, great. And normally what I love to do in trainings is to ask the audience, the participants in the seats that aren't on the stage with us, to tell us where they're from. I won't be able to keep up with the chat, so I'm gonna ask Alan and the VoiceOver folks to help us out with that. But we want your participation as well. But for the folks on stage, as I go through different parts, feel free, because I'll be screen sharing and they'll be screen sharing, and hopefully we all can learn something from them going through some of these things themselves. But feel free to raise your hand, ask me to clarify something, or anything like that. All right. So if we could, I'm just going to go around to my other folks who are on the stage with me. And I'm just going to ask a little bit about who you are and what you want to, kind of get from this, and maybe where you are and how comfortable you feel with, technology and all of that. So hopefully everyone's got all their gear up and running. If something goes wrong, by the way, I basically do live presentations for a living, and things going wrong is just sort of standard practice. So just embrace it, and it happens. Okay. Why don't we start with John? John, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you're looking to get out of today, how comfortable you feel with tech, and maybe if you've made a demo, that kind of stuff?
Sure. So I hope you can all hear me. So for the last couple of years, I've been doing a radio show in London. It's a long story, but I won't bore you with it, but it goes out once a week. And it started as a bit of a very low-key thing, but to last a couple of weeks, and it's lasted 2 years. And I started out doing it with my daughter, who was a trainee sound engineer, and we just used Audacity at home, and we thought it would end after a couple of weeks. But it's going on 2 years. I've tried to get a bit more professional, so I've subscribed to Hindenburg Pro, and I am making some progress in making my presentation sound better. But I want to go up a level. I want to get much more proficient in using the system, how to create a consistent sound for myself week to week, how to use the EQ, that kind of thing. And although I've successfully been using the system to export files, and I have a rough idea about how LUFs work and things like that, and the show goes out successfully as it gets sent as a file and gets broadcast by the radio station, and it seems to work. But I'm sure there's much more I need to learn. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, great answer. Before we move on, I want to just talk about a couple of things with that. One of them is that so we have a good amount of time today, although we are going to cover a lot of detail. It is focused on audiobook production and making your demos for those things. However, there's an awful lot that translates to pro, and for those folks who are unaware, Pro is a different product line of ours, and Pro focuses on podcasts, journalism, and that kind of thing. So some of the whole deal with Hindenburg is that it's a recording program, but it's specifically made to do certain things. So Narrator, which we're going to be mostly looking at today, is made for voiceover work. Audiobooks. Pro is meant for podcasting and all that kind of stuff. But I'm happy to touch on some of those issues, and I'm sure folks are curious about that anyway.
Sure. Well, I might just add that I do have an upcoming, not a commission, but a project to do some narration for my wife's virtual reality project she's putting together for Goldsmiths University in London. So again, maybe narrator might be the thing for that. There are transferable skills, I'm sure.
Yes, and I'll talk about the main difference between the two of them too. But that's great. And I'm not sure if the folks in the audience have reactions, but if we did, we'd all give John a round of applause. Richard?
Hi, I've done one audition on Hindenburg, and it went reasonably well. But I'd like to know more about it. I've watched quite a number of the videos, which are really helpful online. But I'm interested, so I'd like to learn more about doing punch and roll, which I haven't really mastered in terms of the editing. When I did my audition, it took a while. I managed it, but I don't think I did it very quickly. And I'm interested also in the section where you look at laying out the book in terms of the titles to make sure that works properly, and also the making sure that you have a consistent sound, because I've got some recordings which we've done in a studio which I'd like to sort of try to recreate that, because I'm not sure of that element of it. And the final part is, I wondered whether when you're importing a book, whether you can import it from a Kindle, or does it have to only be from Word or Adobe?
Okay, those are all great questions, and we are going to get to a lot of that. Alan makes fun of me every time I use this word, but also whenever I show this one book in presentations, which is Alan's favorite book, which is Bridget Jones's Diary, which for some reason, that's the book we've picked, and I end up having to read that over and over again in front of people. But the word I use a lot too much is demystify, but I'm a big fan of that. And so I am a musician, as you can tell. So that is how I'm coming into this world. But a really important thing to keep in mind is that audio production and audio software and such can get very, very complicated, and it doesn't have any relevance to what you're necessarily doing out there. And so sometimes folks, I've noticed in trainings and other things, they feel maybe insecure about certain things relating to this, because it can be intimidating. It's intimidating for me. The last night I was working on a Pro Tools session with somebody. It's very, very complicated. That has so much of that has, and it's great for what it does in that sphere. It just doesn't have so much to do with these other things. So I am a big fan of demystifying things. So we have a working understanding of it, because it's like, well, what do I need to do? I need to do this thing, and it works this way. Well, maybe it's not so bad, or maybe it's once you have like a good grasp of it, it's not so intimidating. So those are great concerns. I'll try to answer any of those. And like I said, we're definitely going to have Q&A at the end also for the general audience as well. So don't be shy about that either, everybody out there. But I really do encourage you all to ask questions. So Jane, how about you?
Hey, thank you. So first of all, I just want to say I'm glad to be a part of this little pod here, because John, your family sounds amazingly creative. And Richard, I'm a little envious of your sound booth. And Jonathan, your bookshelf is we could compete. And I'd love a bookshelf in the background. Mine's over there. You can't see it right now. But my reason for being here is I've had a podcast for it's about 4 years. It's called Glistening Particles. And I talk with people around the world who are doing things that they love. And I've been on sort of a break for the last 2 years, and I'm getting it started up again. And you can hear me okay? Yeah, through my mic? Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm doing computer. I don't want to have headset on, so I'm doing both. So that's really something that I love doing, but I also feel like I'd like to generate some additional income on the side. And I thought if I could do audiobooks, that might be a nice way to do it because I seem to like talking into a microphone. So that's really why I'm here today. And I have Hindenburg Pro, and I have Narrator, but I haven't used either. I'm not an expert on either of them. I did all of my podcast editing in Audacity and GarageBand. So
Right.
like I do all the recording in Audacity and then the assembly in GarageBand.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard that one before.
I think that's what I was using. I haven't edited one in a while, but yeah, most of it was Audacity.
Right. Okay. So let's start off with me showing a bunch of things, and then we'll move on from there. So I'm going to start screen sharing, yammer on a bit, and then we'll get to showing you and you all some things and walking through it. So, all right. And everyone can see my screen, right? Is that right? Everybody can see this? Okay, very good. So audiobooks made easy. Again, we are going to be focusing on audiobooks, but we will go through a number of different things. I'm happy to just answer other questions regarding podcasting and some differences there, like loudness, lufts, all that kind of stuff. Happy to get into that as well. For those folks, everybody on stage, I believe, has a trial version of Hindenburg, or they have it already, and we can look at that and talk about that. For everybody else, I believe we included this, that we have a 30-day trial, and of course it'd be good to do all that as we get going here, because you can kind of play along. If you're new to it, you can just sort of do some things and try. And a lot of what I'm talking about is going to be applicable to other things. And anyway, these graphics here kind of just show you what you do. There's a manage my account thing, and then there's you enter in your the license key that comes with it, and you should be up and running pretty easily, we hope. So that's that. But yeah, a lot of things I'm going to talk about are applicable to other things and other softwares, other DAWs. There are many, so I sort of can't cover all of this, but I'm familiar with Audacity, very familiar with GarageBand. I use Logic. Logic's my favorite one for making music, and GarageBand is, you may know, this is like baby Logic, or beginner Logic or whatever, and it's great. I have music students, and I show them when they're learning tech and music production stuff. We do that a lot in GarageBand. It's excellent. But again, the main thing is that it's just that those are made for making music, and then people can use them to do other things. But the Hindenburg is specifically made for these things. And I'll go over what the difference between Narrator and Pros as well. So what we're going to go over broadly is knowing the workspace, just knowing what all the stuff is, how it works. Recording, of course, I'm not going to belabor this with here's how you arm the track. The manuscript, which is really the main difference between Narrator and I think every other DAW, which is that you open up text inside of it, or you have the option of doing that. Some editing stuff, and maybe some tricks and tips and such with that, and then publishing, which is the big confusing scary thing. Actually, by the way, it's great for folks who have questions. The VoiceOver network folks are going to be Alan will come back to the stage, and other people as well, and will ask me those questions. So there is a Q&A area next to the chat. It's great to put questions in there too as we're going along. I won't be able to keep up with the chat with everything else going on, so they're going to help me out with that for sure. Okay, so part one is just your book's journey to playing on an app, and this is going to be basically recording. All right, so just something to get in mind or keep in mind with all this stuff. Oh, by the way, just a little context to me and how I got in with Hindenburg. I work for the Library of Congress, we made books for the blind. It's this big program here in the States, and there's, of course, the European equivalent of that, which is Daisy. We work with those people as well. We switched to Hindenburg, and then I ended up teaching that, so then I ended up working with Hindenburg over the course of time. And so I've trained a lot of narrators, and a lot of, I mean, some of you might do the Books of the Blind thing as a side thing yourself. It's a great program anyway, but you certainly learn a lot. So, you know, when you, so I have been around heaps and heaps and heaps of narrators making books, and the things that are important to keep in mind are things like this. One difference between podcasting and audiobook production courses, audiobooks are long. It takes a long time to make it. It's just a different consideration, okay? You know, if we record this now, which we are, and we said this is our podcast, we could put it out with no editing or anything involved if we wanted to, and that would be that. But an audiobook, you're going to go in and revisit it and revisit it and revisit it. So, you know, being consistent really matters in an audiobook. And another thing is that typically in podcasts are the things, it's not just one person speaking the whole time, but that's what an audiobook is for the most part, almost always, okay? So if you have things like noisy nose breaths, loud lip smacks, or like excessive mouth noise, or anything like that, your voice is all there is for 6 hours. So if it's there for 6 hours, that's kind of the deal. And when we get into pickups and stuff like that, and Richard asked a question about that, or you know, if you do a bad pickup, let's say, and that's just how you get your recording going, well, you're going to have to either edit it, or it's going to be a bad pickup, like a part of a word's cut off, or it's just noisy breath. Those are the common ones. It means that your whole book is going to be filled with that. Again, hours and hours of potential editing. So you want to just avoid the approach that I take personally. I would recommend to you, which is like just avoid that stuff in the first place to save yourself all the time on the back end. All right, so pre-roll, which is something Richard also talked about, okay? And that's what I was going on about, okay? The whole idea with pre-roll, which is also called punch and roll, it's also called pickups. It does exist in pro, and some people for narration, like you're narrating, you're doing like your podcast, and it's not like a live situation. You're like reading from a script. You know, we have that functionality in Hindenburg, but it's much more applicable in narrator, because an audiobook is, if you think about it, a collection of all your different takes. That's what it is. So the whole idea is that you hear the last little bit of what you did, and then you pick up and you keep going, a pickup or a punch in, okay? You can adjust the times of pre-roll, and if you do this the right way, you can avoid the editing at the back end. I can show you, if you want, an example of a good pickup and a bad pickup. And that matters just because, again, if you have to do a lot of editing, the thing that comes up is that audiobooks can be hard for some voiceover talent, because if you leave all the back end stuff to the end, then you might get frustrated and want to farm that out, meaning you hire somebody to do all the editing and deal with the technical stuff, and then it just might not be cost effective to do it. So the whole approach here is like, if you can do these things, you can make it cost effective, and you know, you do it before in the beginning, okay? So we're just going to get into Hindenburg and look at the workspace, recording, input monitoring. I hope to demystify a little bit of that. Punch in, this very important feature called record a selection, and then exporting a selection, which is really how you would make a demo for ACX, okay? And I'm going to put the links at the end into in the chat here that cover these videos that we just made on this subject, and we walk you through the whole process. Here's how you make a demo, here's when you do your audition, and then we have like a playlist already about like how you make the books, okay? So all this makes sense so far? All sound good? All right. So here we are in Narrator. I'm actually doing this with our new version of Narrator, which we are going to be showing you all soon. So since it is a in production version, you never know, something might go wrong, but it works the same way. And I can show this a little more, but this is for video game scripts and for other voiceover things like this. So but the way Narrator works, which is opening up text, it does this, but now it's really streamlined this process. So you could, instead of having to make 200 files, you just make one file. So I can answer any questions about that if anybody has that. But let's just start with a new blank session. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you open this up something. And I'm just going to talk a bit about the workspace and anything like that. And so for the folks on stage, if there's something you are curious about here, don't be shy. Just unmute yourself and ask me as I'm going on here. Okay, so there were some DAWs that were mentioned before, GarageBand, Audacity. Something that's important to know about Hindenburg is that there's no other screen to go into. So when you get into more advanced DAWs, like again, they're made for music, they have like mixer windows and other things. The idea here is you don't do that. So GarageBand, for example, if you want to make a fade or turn something down, you do something called drawing automation, which means you open up this separate area and you have to like draw it in and that kind of thing. It doesn't work like that in Hindenburg, and I'll show you how it does work. Or in Pro Tools, there are different modes that you have. It's shuffle, grid, slip mode, and you have to toggle in between them and all that. And it makes sense for music production, doesn't make sense for making a book. I can show you like the difference kind of with how this works. All right, but you have sort of stuff up on top, and the idea with this is that it's not that much. If some other DAWs, Audacity, you might notice there's all this stuff up on top, and you don't maybe know what it is. You need to have things here. Even these drop-down menus up top, there's not so much that it's overwhelming. You need to have access to things, but the idea is like not to be like, here's 400 features, and you just want to start recording and just record your voice. Okay. By the way, if anybody has any questions, it seems like everybody who's on stage has their setup and their mics and pop filters and all of this. So it seems like everyone's good on that front. But if you have any questions about that stuff, I'm happy to talk about that as well. Okay. So one thing about that, I'm speaking into my little setup here, which is plugged into an interface. Okay. So meaning that the volume and everything is being controlled by that. I'll just show you. Okay. In my case, it's this. So this is my volume and I'm hearing it out of there and all that stuff. So when you have that situation in Hindenburg, this top thing here is a slave to it, meaning it just doesn't, I'm controlling it somewhere else. So this just takes a backseat. But if you didn't have that, if you plug directly into it, this is how you would be able to adjust your microphone and that kind of thing. So a USB situation. All right, and beneath that is panning. You're probably not going to use that. It just means you could have something go out of the left or the right side. And then this right here, this arm record thing, you notice that until I turned it on, nothing is happening. When I turn it on, it starts registering my voice. Because I'm using an interface, I'm able to hear myself in my ears. This is an important detail too. That's called input monitoring. And almost all interfaces have that. And an interface, I'm sure many of you know already, is what you plug the microphone into so it goes into your computer. And it has a preamp in it, which just powers your microphone. But it also allows you to hear yourself in your own ear, to monitor it, which is, of course, really important for a lot of reasons. If you're doing a podcast, the reason you see, on a video calls of podcast, everybody has headphones on is because if the four of us were having a podcast right now, and we were all, sort of live, and I'm speaking, and let's say Jane didn't have headphones on, her microphone would be picking my voice up coming out of her speaker, and you would hear this like delay feedback loop thing. That's why everybody does that. So anyway, if you didn't have that, you can input monitor in Hindenburg by right-clicking on the arm track thing, and you can turn record monitoring on. But I just want to let you know why that is there. The level that you are in your ears also really matters because the louder that you are, it's just a natural human tendency to be quieter in your delivery. I mean, it sort of makes sense. You're loud in your ears, so you just sort of deliver less. So you kind of have to find that balance that works for you. All right. So I'm just going to start a record, and then we can talk about other things. So basically, at the top here, these are just common editing commands: undo, redo. That's really important. Zooming in and zooming out. It's probably the most important thing, actually, to get used to if you're not used to it. This mode business here, I'm not going to talk about. It's more complicated, but amazing. And this stuff here is how you can like build the structure of a book, and I can talk about that. I'm not really going to focus on it, but you can basically build a book and record it however you want to. You can even record the whole thing out of order if you wanted to. So, okay, the track is armed. I'm just going to record, all right, which you could do by going down here and hitting the transport bar, or there's hotkeys for that. So this is me speaking. And what I would recommend, by the way, on the whole hotkeys or those little shortcuts and things, recording programs can do so many things. Any one of the ones that were mentioned today, or the ones that you guys are using out there, they could do all of these different things, like hundreds of different features, and all of them have these little keystrokes. But what's kind of maybe overwhelming about that is just too many things. But if you probably will use a top 5 of those things in day-to-day life, maybe just make a list for yourself, either in like a notepad, digital notepad, or anything else like that. Okay, make a little list for yourself. It's a good thing to have. You could print it out, have it next to the keyboard, and some of them are like record. Maybe some stuff I'll talk about later, like export selection, or this record selection thing I'll show you in a sec, stuff like that. Okay, or maybe where a few things are, like almost all recording programs, if you want to change something, you'll be going into preferences and changing something in there. Okay, so then you go in here and you change whatever you want. So maybe just knowing how to get there or get there fast is kind of like useful. A few of them, and you don't need to know 100. That's all. Okay, so when I stopped the recording, you saw a couple of things happen. One of them is that this was highlighted. It looked like this, and then it actually brought the volume of it down, and that's because it does this thing, which is called auto leveling. So there's a range, a sort of sweet spot range. Now my microphone is a little too hot. You can see it kind of peeking out here. So if I was doing this for real, I wouldn't use this, but I would turn it down on my interface. By the way, is my volume good for you guys out there, or is it a little too loud? Good? Okay, well then I'm not going to turn it down. So but it's a good example in here anyway. So it's higher than the range that it should be. So what it did is it brings it down. Now, and this feature exists in Pro and in Narrator. And Narrator really matters, again, because audiobooks are long. It's gonna take many weeks to record this. It's very easy to mess something up, sound a little different from one day or 1 week or 1 month to another, and you have your settings and such. You don't want to have to deal with any of this after the fact. So the idea in the approach with this is that if you can just sort of do all this as you're going, you're kind of solving a bit of the problem, and you're matching yourself from take to take as it is. So remember when I talked about zooming in and out? That will be a good one to know, just to get used to being able to kind of bounce around and get around easily in any DAW. It's just something that, like, you don't typically on Microsoft Word or something have to zoom in and out, but I mean, but in these things you almost always have to. I have at the moment 20 seconds of audio, but this is going to be 5 hours long, and you got to be able to get around to different parts and other things like that, and just know where you are in the file. That's important too. Okay, so with that, we're going to look in and, well, let's just talk about what I'm looking at here in the first place. Like I mentioned Pro Tools before, which is gray again. It has these different modes, which means if you want to do a certain thing, you go into that mode. Then you go into a different mode to do a different thing. Logic, which is, I love Logic, as I said before. Your cursor, your mouse, which you can see here, holding, like if you wanted to do a fade, you actually go in and pick different tools and all this stuff. So it has all this functionality, but you have to constantly be kind of like doing different things with it. The idea with Hindenburg is that everything is all kind of in one place. Your mouse defaults to a multi-tool. What that means is that if I'm at the bottom of this waveform right here, right? Let me just resize this a little. You can see if I'm at the bottom here, right? It looks like an I-beam. And the reason for that is that that's for making a selection, being able to do this stuff. Now, I'm going to show you why you would use this. One of the reasons is if this is how you grab sections of audio, make copies, move things, or delete stuff. Okay, we'll talk a bit about those things too. If you do this by accident, if you're clicking around and accidentally make one of these selections here, it's very easy to get rid of. You just press escape and you'll get rid of that. Okay, but that's why you'd have to do that. When I go about halfway up on the file, on the region, by the way, region just means referring to the actual audio. And so this is in 2 regions now, 2 different chunks. And that's all a region is referring to, the different pieces of audio. So if I'm about here, this is so I can grab different things. And if this was split up in a bunch of different chunks or something, I could say, I need this to be able to grab it, to copy it or move it or anything like that. Okay. I'll go over anything like that you would want me to, if you'd like. Now, when I'm at the side of the region, it looks like this little trimmer tool. This is pretty common in almost all audio. It's because this is called non-destructive, which means that, and this is a pretty major difference between this and Audacity, is that when you have this bit of audio, like let's say I have this, this is split here and I copied this. Okay, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I had this and I had a copy of it over here, right? So it looks like I just have this one little segment of this larger piece, right? But with this trimmer tool, you can trim and have the whole thing. So you always have the ability to go back and do that. And it's used in editing and other things as well, okay? And if you wanted to turn the volume down, instead of drawing in the automation, like I talked about before, you got to like draw basically a little box. You don't do that with Hindenburg. You just grab the region itself. The idea is just tactile. You just grab it and pull it down. And you definitely get used to that, or I do. And the way you do a fade, same thing. There's no other tool or drawing. You just grab the side of the region if you wanted to fade something out. So that's just what you're looking at. This is the workspace, kind of just how that stuff looks and works and all that. If you see me going back a few steps, that's the undo and redo. Again, if you're doing that, just be careful. I would say, like, know how many things you're undoing. If you undo 1 step or 2 steps, don't go further than 2, because you can undo the whole thing. If I just keep undoing, it'll all go away. Okay, but you can always put it back. But just be careful. Okay, that's the stuff. That's just sort of basic recording, the setup of it, what you're looking at, because some folks don't know or maybe are unfamiliar. Let's talk a little bit about those pickups and how that works, and this very kind of important feature, which is recording a selection and then recording a demo. But I wanted to show you one thing first that's an important little thing from ACX. So when we're getting into this, producing a demo for ACX, this is taken from the website. And so, what it says is you should add as many audio samples as you'd like, focus on diversity to show off your range. Samples posted within your profile will be ordered from newest at the top to oldest at the bottom. And don't worry if you don't have many audiobook credits to your name. Simply create some samples from scratch, upload them, and tag each sample with words that describe it and the skill it reflects. The samples you upload and how you tag them will greatly influence if and how you appear in a rights holder search. So when people are searching around, okay? So something to just keep in mind here is we're going to approach this from the idea of how do we just record something. We're not going to look at opening anything in the manuscript first. Just you want to either record or import something or other into Hindenburg. So let's just say you're recording from scratch and you want to just kind of get going. You want, basically, if we're being realistic, short clips that are maybe 30 seconds long or something like that, to just showcase a different part of your ability as a narrator. Okay, and I'm also going to show you how, let's say you recorded, you were reading something that was like about a minute long, and you only wanted to take a certain piece of it and say, that's what I want as my demo. How do I just get the piece that's like the keeper take, so to speak? All right, but let's talk about how you would do a pickup and then record a selection. Okay, so a pickup, as we looked at before, is when you are reading along with, let's say, a little script that you have going, you're reading from a book, anything like that, and you make a mistake. Going to happen. you can you would do a punch in or a pickup. Okay, so this white line is called the playhead. Wherever you put that white line, all right, is the point of where the pickup of the recording is going to be. So the reason zooming in and out is so important on any DAW is that if you are, let's say I was reading along and I know that then I messed up here, you're going to have to go back, you know, to a different spot in the file. The beginning of a sentence, by the way, you definitely want to do mid-sentence pickups sound really, really bad often, usually. So if you are going to do it, let's say it's a very long sentence that's separated by a semicolon, maybe that's your pickup spot. You don't want to do it arbitrarily. You wouldn't pick up with the last 2 words of a sentence. It is funny sounding, but not good for your demo. So do your pickups at the beginning of a sentence. The purpose of pre-roll is that, let's say I'm going to record from here, okay? And I'm going to listen to the bit of audio that's happening beforehand so that I could match myself. And the reason zooming in and out is important is that if you're zoomed out and you're far away, you might be like, I'm right about here, seems good. And then if you zoom in, you realize like, I'm sort of I put the playhead in the middle of a word at the end of a breath or an S sound. This is a breath. So if I put the playhead in the middle of that breath, it's going to cut it off and cut it in half. So it's all fixable, but if you don't have to fix it in the first place, it's better. Okay. So you can do that by zooming in. You also, I'm used to doing it by clicking around like that, but you can do this by rewinding. Okay. And just hear what you're going to, go over, which you do by just hitting playback, which you do by pressing the space bar, hotkeys or those little shortcuts and things. Okay. So that's, another way of doing that. I did that rewind, by the way, for those folks playing at home. The way you can use this program, you can actually do the whole thing, this sort of design, you can do the whole thing with one hand. So J and if you look at your keyboard, the J, K, and L keys, they're all next to each other. J rewinds, and it sounds like Twin Peaks, which sounds awesome. And then if you press J and K together, it goes fast. Chipmunks, Twin Peaks. And then if you go L, it goes, I'm sure you can imagine, it goes the other way, it goes forward. And if you press K and L together, Chipmunks. Okay, it's just a way to get around the file. Of course, you also could just put the playhead anywhere you want to, which you can do by clicking above or below in the bottom part of the file and press spacebar. Recording programs can do so many things. I sound drunk there. Recording programs. So I would put the playhead here, personally, after my breath and before the start of the new take.
Jonathan, could I ask whether you suggest, if you know you've made a mistake, whether you do a click or you make a noise so it's easier to find, or would you not recommend that?
Let's say I'm reading a book about Barack Obama. I go, Barack, blah, blah, Obama. I definitely said the name wrong, and I know I just said it wrong. I would just stop the recording. And let's do a sort of false start. That's what I call them, which is, this often happens, by the way, with, at least to me, I'm like Mr. Mistakes. Whenever I have to do my own voiceovers and stuff, it's just a lot of me swearing and making mistakes and being angry. So I'll just do that in real life. What the heck? So here's where I'm going to do a pickup, keys or those little shortcuts and things. So that was a bit of pre-roll that I talked about before. And here I'm recording again. And let's say I just went, I made a mistake. What I would realistically do, since I already found the spot of where I made the mistake, instead of like listening to it or finding it again, I would just go back to undo. And when you undo it, it just goes back one step and you already found it. And I'd just do it again. Keys or those little shortcuts and things. Okay, so the pre-roll, by the way, is set to happen automatically. So you don't have to do anything to set that up. It just sort of happens. Now, when I stop this, see, as I said before, my mic is too hot right now. It's too loud. So when I stop it, it'll turn it down to match this take to that take. That's how you would do that. All right. It does that automatically. You don't have to do anything for that if you want to. If some folks don't want to record with that on, I would definitely recommend it. But if you don't, you can apply it after the fact as well. I'm happy to get in there and talk about that as well. I want to show you a couple more things and then
Jonathan?
turn it. Yes.
I'm sorry. I just have a quick question. What did you say a false start is?
Oh, that's just my term for it. It's
Okay.
when you often, I don't know what this is exactly. I just see this. I've seen this a million times in other narrators too, who might read like a whole page without making a mistake, and then they make a mistake. You go back to being in that sense, and then they'll make a mistake right when they go again. You know what I mean? It's like you didn't make a mistake for 20 minutes and then you just make 2 in a row. There's something about that. I don't know what that is, but I call it a false start, meaning like, okay, we're going to pick up and go. These or those little shortcuts and things. The chicken went to, stop it. And you're like, well, now I got to like find my spot again. You just undo it. Just undo it. If it's like a false start. Does that make sense? What I mean by false start like that?
It totally makes sense. It's like it takes a 5-minute audio into like a half-hour audio, just fixing that one thing
Yeah.
15 times.
Yeah. So when you do it, let's just do it one more time for everybody. Or those little shortcuts and things. This is my false start. I messed it up. So instead of leaving this and this other piece here and all that, just go back a step. You already found where the thing you wanted to replace. So just go back one step. That's undo and redo. I would definitely put those on my little hotkeys shortcut thing. Those are really handy.
Could I ask just Jonathan whether you do? I understand that about the undo, but if it's a new spot that doesn't work on the undo because it's not sort of recent enough, when you find the spot, do you press split? That's what I've been doing, which I'm not sure whether that's correct.
No, it's not. I'll just tell you what split is. That's a great question. So up here, by the way, if you notice, when I had nothing here, it was just blank. These icons are blanked out up here. These are just sort of like common things that people do editing wise. And I'll talk about the difference between all of these real quickly. So that, it's cut, copy, paste, clear, which is delete. And then this other one's split. All these are basically the same things you'd see in like Microsoft Word, except for split. So what split is Hindenburg, the way it records, it's like you see the region here and then it's in this like box, right? That you're seeing here. Split just allows you to add, it's called split point. It allows you to wherever you put that playhead, that white line, it'll split that there so that you can isolate any piece of audio, okay? And it also works if you make a selection and you say split, okay? Then it's gonna split this here. Now, why would you wanna do that? Well, you'd want to do that if you came in really hot on a word like here, and you just wanted to turn this down a little bit, you could do that. That's why. So that's what a split point is. I think what you wanted to do is this thing called record selection, which is like a game changer kind of thing. I'll show you in a second. But if let's say you were reading from a book, get to the end of the page. Okay, then you stop the recording. You didn't make any mistakes. Playhead would be here, and then you just pick up and keep going, right? If you had some schmutz at the end, like I have here, I'd probably put the playhead like to cut off the schmutz there. I don't know, whatever that is. That's just my breath. But you might have to, depending on when you stop the recording, cover over any of the stuff that you don't want, like this little click sound or something, whatever that is. But if you were just picking up the recording like it was here, you could just press record again, any one of the ones that were mentioned today, and then I'd be recording again, and that's how I'd do it, just continuing on recording, just as kind of usual. Now, let's talk about what happens if you had to record something in the past. So as you're making your audiobook here, you're making like, let's just pretend I had more, right? You're just for a sec. So it's take after take after take after take, and it's, hours and hours of takes, right? So let's just say there's a bunch of stuff here, all my different takes, all my stuff, but I needed to, maybe I review it. Or even if you're making a demo, let's just talk about a demo. You're making the demo for, your page on ACX, and you realize I said something wrong here, or I didn't like it, or whatever it was. How do you fix something that was in the past? Meaning you're not just adding on to the file here. Like, how do you fix this part? That's a pretty big thing there. And if you have to do this in other DAWs, of course you can. It's just that you have to shuffle things around and put them back together. It's a drag. So there is this thing here, which is a very handy way of doing this, which is called record selection. So this is that selection thing here. So that's why you would need to do that. One of the many reasons. Okay. So I've isolated this bit of audio. By the way, you can put these in by pressing, they're called in and out markers as well. So you can press I. I'll just go back again. And okay. So anywhere you click, you could press, so you can make it by clicking and dragging, right? Or you press I for in. And if you wanted it over here, you press O for out. It's another way of doing it. That's very handy if you have to deal with a large thing, like let's say you wanted to export something or make a selection for something that's like 40 minutes long. It's really hard to click and drag over 40 minutes. You might want to just go in here and then way down here at the end of the file or something, you go out and you have this big selection. So it's actually more handy in an audiobook context. So let's say you want to record over this, which is like somewhere in the middle. There's this fancy way of doing that, which is it's just like the recording we did before, except you're going to put what you are recording to go exactly in this selection. Okay, so when you right click here, you get some options and some things that you didn't have access to before. Again, the idea being that we didn't want to overwhelm everybody with like options. So some things are sort of cleverly hidden away. This one, record selection, will work just like a pickup that we did before, except it'll be a little different for that. So this is me speaking. Okay, and this is that was the pre-roll. I'm recording now, but it looks like I've gone over the selection, which I definitely have. Okay, so it looks like this is no good because I'm recording over the stuff I want to keep. But if I stop it, it puts it in that space that I selected and it shuffles everything over and off to the side. Okay, so that's a huge, that was definitely a huge thing for us when we, company I used to work at when we changed to Hindenburg was this exact feature, because putting in corrections was, like a game changer. So again,
Jonathan, is that something that works in Pro as well, or just in Narrator?
That one's just a narrator one.
Okay.
Good question.
So just so I understand, you're saying that like if I re-recorded that section, but it went a little longer than what was there before, it's going to push everything over automatically?
Yeah. In fact, it would do the same thing if you did it the other way. Let's say I have this big, huge thing I want to replace, but I actually only need, I'm going to do it, wrong. Okay. So a right click and you can get to it. It's about here on this menu. There's also, of course, there's a keyboard shortcut for this too. Which is Shift Command E. I'm sorry, record section. Shift Option R. But you could do it this way too. Okay, hotkeys for that. So this is me. Again, that was pre-roll. And let's say I stop the recording, though I have this big, huge selection here. It will basically do the opposite thing. It'll take everything out, and because you only are putting what you're recording into that space there.
Okay, I'm done now. That's the coolest thing I needed right there. I could leave this now and I'd be good. That's so cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a good one for sure. So I thought what we would do is, so we do have a lot of stuff to get through, even though there's a lot of time here. I thought it'd be fun to just maybe with the three of you just walk through a couple of these things. Actually, I just want to show you one more thing, which you would need to do for exporting your demo. Actually, you know what? I'll show it to you after we kind of check in. So if you guys feel comfortable, maybe we could look at just, quickly, we'll open up a session. You could do a record, maybe a punch in, and maybe this record selection thing. Okay. And so does everybody have narrator? Yes. Okay. Why don't we start with John? So John, if you share your screen. And when you do this, you want to select the first option, which is share your whole screen. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about one thing first. So in John's, this is a great example. in John's example here, you notice it looks a little bit different than mine. Like the manuscript window isn't there, other things. So if that ever happens to you and you're doing this, it's you don't need to worry about it. It's easy to get it back. If you go to Window, the Window drop-down menu, select that, yep, and go to Reset Layout. All that stuff will come back, okay? And you can resize this and take this out and do whatever you want to with all this stuff. Okay, so why don't you go to Arm the Track. Great, and then just do a record.
Okay. Welcome to my radio show. You're listening to Isolation Vacation on Resonance FM. It's Monday, the 3rd of... Oh, no, it's not. Oh.
That's okay. Okay, why don't you stop the recording?
And then we're going to put the right date in, maybe.
Right. So why don't we do two things? We'll do a pickup, which means I would do it by zooming in. You don't have to, but I would definitely do that. If you want to, the shortcut for that, you're on Windows, right?
Yeah, but I don't have a mouse. I'm just
you don't need it
on the touchpad. So, yeah.
You don't even need that either. Control plus and minus will do it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There you go. Okay. And why don't you go put control minus a little bit? There we go. Just for the first thing, why don't we just record over the those last four or three spikes there. Put the playhead there and do a record.
It's Wednesday, the 23rd of June.
Beautiful, beautiful. So that's a great job. Now, why don't you zoom out a little bit? Okay. And go back to the beginning. By the way, going back to the beginning, you can do all that there. Yep, that's fine. You can do that by pressing go to 0. Why don't you record something maybe over this area with the largest amount of text there.
Okay.
Oh, no, sorry. False start. What would you do for a false start?
Control Z.
There you go. Great. Actually, what I mean, I should have been more clear. Why don't you make a selection, like so highlight or use in and out, the I and O for in and out markers, and just pick an area somewhere in the middle to record over.
That is a question I was going to ask. How do I select the very beginning or the very end of a section?
From the very like if you wanted to do it from there.
Yeah, because my I bar disappears as soon as I get to the beginning.
Oh, okay. If you press I, the I key.
Yeah.
And then go to the end and press O.
The end of here.
Anywhere.
Okay.
Sure. Click and press O.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
And you've done it. Just to show people that, or for you, like, let's just assume that you're not going to do it from the beginning. It's something that you needed to fix that was in the middle, kind of like what we looked at before. Yeah. Why don't you highlight, there you go, something like that. And so if you right click now that you have a selection, again, this is just all for example. Great. You see this new menu and then record selection.
Okay. Welcome to my radio show. You're listening to Resonance FM on 104.4.
Okay, there you go. That's how you would do it. So excellent job. Why don't we give a go? So why don't you stop sharing for a moment? I'd say we all give a round of applause. Excellent. Very nice. Richard, why don't you do a screen share and share your sound as well, and share your whole desktop. It's just easier that way.
Okay.
Okay. So you're recording your demo. First thing you do is you'd arm the track.
Arming the track.
Great. And then you would do record, which would be Command R.
And a recording now.
Nope, that is just playing. And the reason I know that is because I don't see any waveform. It's not in red. I just see the cursor kind of zooming by. By the way, if that happens, why don't you go ahead and press the spacebar again? You see how it's like sort of going and going and you're like, what's happening? Maybe where am I? The reason for that is actually we're just zoomed in really closely. So if you actually just zoom out a little bit, yeah, there you go. Now if you press the space bar, the same thing is happening. It's just sort of, we're zoomed out and seeing it from further away. So if ever you see that happening and you're zoomed in close saying, where am I? Just zoom back out. See the forest, not the individual tree. Okay, so go back to the beginning, which you can do by the key for that should be delete, Command delete. There you go. You're there. And then record, which you can do by, there you go.
I'm recording now. I'm doing a test recording and I've just made a mistake. Oh, I want to go back one step.
Great. So why don't you just, for the sake, this is only for the sake of demonstration, just go back where you said one step. Why don't you try the rewind thing we looked at before, which is J would rewind it. There you go. And then if you want the fast chipmunk version, J and K. Yeah, why don't you just, for this one, why don't we put the playhead right in front of where you started speaking? So that will be back at the beginning. That'll work too. But if you wanted to push that playhead forward and just go right to it, you could do it with those keys too. You could just press L, hold down L for a little bit. There you go. And then maybe you just let go. There you go. Or if you want to rewind a little bit, let's say you want to put it right in front of that piece of audio where you're speaking. Keep going. There you go. That's fine. Now do a re-record.
I do a right click.
Nope, you just press Command R or Control R.
Or just touch the record button at the bottom. I'm on a Mac, yeah.
Okay, yep.
And I'm testing replacing that section.
Yes. Keep go. Yep, there you go. So that was just a regular old punch-in, right? But if you wanted to record sort of something, why don't you do that again? Hit undo. There you go. Click on it. Okay. So record again and just speak for a little bit. Speak for a while.
Okay. I'm speaking for a while now, replacing that section and wondering whether that's going to work. That seems to be pretty good, and it looks fine this end.
Okay, press stop. Maybe zoom out a little bit. See more of the forest. Yeah, if you want the keystroke for that is Command plus and minus. You also can hold Command down and use your mouse too, if you wanted to.
Okay, Command
plus will go in, Command minus will go out.
Okay, that's fully out, I think then.
Yeah, so why don't you just, again, we're just being arbitrary here, make a selection somewhere in the middle of you speaking there.
I better go in a bit to see where I'm going, wouldn't I?
Sure. You would in real life, yes.
Okay,
yeah.
well, I'll go there then. Okay, I'm doing there.
So make a selection, which you can do by clicking and dragging. Just regular old click. So yeah, this is something, remember how I said it's like a multi-tool? You're a little too high on the waveform. See how your mouse is a pointer arrow?
Yeah.
If you just go to the bottom, there you go, it becomes that I-beam again. Okay, that's right clicking. You want just regular click. Okay, so click and drag. There you go. Great. Great. So let's say you wanted to, I tell you what, how about you go the other way, just for example. So you're in the middle of audio.
So I
just press escape.
Escape. Okay. Yeah.
Click and drag again. Just go the other way.
Go the other way.
There you go. Great. So let's say you wanted to record something that's in there. Again, this is hypothetical, but let's say this was a large piece of audio and this is a sentence or something you wanted to replace. Now you would right click.
Oh, I've got a mouse pad thing, which is actually quite fiddly. I think that.
Okay.
Which is what's happening there. So right clicking is not easy. Oh, there it is. I've done it, I think. Yeah.
And then you want, record selection.
And this is my special section that I'm just adding in now.
There you go. And you see it put that in there and it shuffled over the piece that you were wanting to keep. So great job. Let's all give a digital round of applause to Richard. Thank you very much. If you could stop the share. Great. And then Jane, I think you know what we're going to do.
All right.
So share the full screen and share sound. This little box to share sound. Okay, great. If you got a selection there, it looks like that. You want to get rid of it, press escape. It'll go away.
Okay. All right.
All right. So why don't you just do a record? Just arm the track, do a record. For those who want a keyboard shortcut for that, Shift R is the arm track keyboard shortcut.
All right. Is it picking? I don't think it's picking up my audio here.
It's not. The track is not armed. So now we're just playing.
Okay.
So to arm the track, you have to go to that. There you go. On the left side, that little bullet looking icon.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Now you're ready to arm. You can see your voice picked up.
Now I can hit record, or it's picking it up.
Yeah. So basically, the whole arm track thing is like, it's like, which one is ready? This one. And the reason for this, by the way, if any folks want to know, is like, let's say you're recording 4 people at the same time. How is it going to, or you have 4 microphones, but you only want to record 2 or something. You have to be able to turn them on and off. So that's why. So this one's armed, it's ready to go. Now, when you press record, you'll be recording.
All right. Welcome to BuzzBits, where we're mastering mobility and bite-sized nuggets. I can't even talk. See, we have things to fix. In this episode, we'll talk about et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, great. You can stop it.
All right.
So you saw the auto leveling there. So why don't we zoom in a little bit?
How do I get the zoom menu out of my way?
The zoom. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, I'll go here. I think I got it. Okay.
Just so we're clear for those folks watching, she's referring to the Zoom that you're watching this on.
Right. Okay.
That can be confusing. So many of the same words. So why don't you just pick like that last little bit why don't you just do a pickup right in front of that?
Okay. Sure. Right there. Okay.
Sure. Why don't you get used to zooming in and out to do it?
All right. Oh, okay.
There you go. Good.
Right.
And if you want the keyboard shortcut for that, it's Command plus will zoom in and Command minus will zoom out.
All right.
There you go.
I'm there.
Sure. Now I don't know what that is, a little lip smack or something. If I was doing this in real life, I might put that playhead like a little bit before that just to not record over it or not keep it in, And now you would just press record again, just like you did before. The keyboard shortcut for that is Command R.
And this is where I'm going to begin recording over that information.
Excellent. Great. That's a pickup. Okay.
All right.
And a great way to do it. So again, your demo, and then when you get to the point of audiobook, it's going to be realistically, it's a collection of these pickups. Okay. So why don't you make a selection now, which you do by having your mouse at about the bottom. Yeah. So it makes that I-beam. And then if you click and drag, great. Now, if you wanted to just put audio in there, again, we're doing this arbitrarily just to get used to it. If you right click,
I've probably got the same right click malfunction here that Richard had because I'm on a Mac with a touchpad.
Oh, okay. By the way, the way you do that is with 2 fingers and you go, bloop.
That's what it is. Okay.
That's what it is. And then you go record selection.
I know that until I'm on video and, Okay.
Same here.
All right. I know that until I'm on video and everybody's watching. All right.
There you go. And it shoves it in there. So excellent job. Let's give Jane a beautiful round of applause.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Yes.
You know how it didn't auto level that? Where do I make sure that it auto levels the new recordings?
I believe it did. Why don't you try it again? Undo.
Okay.
Go Command Z or do that. Try it again.
All right. Totally forgot what I'm doing again. Okay. Oh yeah, right click.
2 fingers. There you go.
2 fingers. Got it.
Now there's also a keyboard shortcut for this.
All right. So I'm recording additional information in there and we'll see what happens next. Oh, it did. You're right. Sorry about that.
All good. But somebody had asked that question I could see in the chat. So we're going to, if you stop to share, I'm going to talk about that and a couple of other things anyway. Okay, so there we go. There you all are. So how to get to stuff in any case. If you go to, when I refer to drop-down menus, this is what I'm talking about. It's all the stuff that's on top, okay? There's not really too much here. But in this, for every one of these, it does something, right? So this here, preferences, that's where, and that's in the narrator dropdown. Now it looks a little different on Windows. It's just the way that Mac and Windows are set up differently. So in Windows, the same thing I'm going to open up here is in a different place. It's in this tool menu. You'll see something called options. The window it brings up is the same, just where it is different, okay? So for Mac, it's preferences, which is in the narrator dropdown, and has this keyboard shortcut, which is true of all Mac preferences, by the way, which is Command, comma. And for Window, it's tools, okay? Tools dropped in the tools dropdown, you'll see something that's called options. All right, but in any case, it brings up this. Okay, and in this preferences is where you can kind of customize things. I'm happy to explain these things. You don't really have to know that for these purposes or to use the program. This is basically so you can customize this in a recording studio, have different channels, go different places and such. This is where you choose your microphones. This has to do, I probably don't want to explain this, but basically it has to do with how the audio is coming in. And this is the sort of conventional and standard thing. You don't have to really do anything or change it. It's going to be set up for you. Okay, interface, just some stuff of where you can customize how you want it to work. Okay, so one key edit commands is this stuff I'll show you in a second where you can, instead of hitting like, for certain features that are very common, remember I said make that like top 5 list? Well, one of them, some of these are like edit commands like cut and other things like split. Some of them are so you can just do it with one key and just makes life a little bit easier. So I checked that one. Automatic track height, just it has to do with how it looks. It's not really a big deal. Mouse zoom wheel zooms around playhead is important. That is, especially it matters when you have lots of audio. It matters just how the zooming is. It's a preference thing. But I want it to center on it like that. So I actually would check that box. Center playhead after zooms, that's the sort of same thing here. Next, underneath this is pre-roll time. So if you wanted to make that pre-roll, we put a time in there, which is, it's a Danish company. So like they do everything in milliseconds and such. This just means basically 3 seconds. If you wanted more or less time, you could alter this. If you made this 5,000, it would just be a little bit longer, the pre-roll time. And for me, it's just too long. You're just kind of like hanging out and waiting. A little bit shorter, whatever you want to do. I actually think that is kind of set to the sweet spot. This loop on play selection, what this refers to, you probably don't want that checked. I did something a couple of times where I made a selection like this and I played just this little bit that's in the selection like this. Recording programs can do so, like I'm just playing that little bit. So that is, you do that by, so just to play any bit of audio, you just press the space bar. Many things, any one of the ones, and it's going to keep going and going and going. I'll show you, you can alter that too. But if I hold down shift and press the space bar, it'll play. Recording programs can do just that selection, just anything that you played there. What this thing in preferences refers to loop on play selection is so obnoxious, but I'll show it to you. It's just going to do this. It's just going to loop this over and over again. If you hold it down, mention today, mention today, mention today, mention today. Okay. That's only for like fine editing and stuff. Don't turn it on. Okay. That's basically what I'm getting at. So don't turn that on. Record with pre-roll. You don't have to have it on at all if you don't want to. I think it'd be crazy not to. There are some instances actually why you need to be able to turn that off, but that's why. Underneath this, return on stop. That's an important one to know about, especially for reviewing. Again, let's say this bit of audio I got here is instead of 44 seconds, it's 4 hours and 44 minutes. It's a lot. I'm going to review a chapter I did or something. I'm listening. I wanted to just listen for that. So this is me. If I press the space bar again, you can have it so that it stops right where it is, or it returns back to where you were. So typically the way this works is that if you're recording, you want this box selected. So the one we're talking about is this record on stop. The reason being that, like, if I wanted to put this here, I found the space, maybe I listened to this file, see where I am, and then I'd be recording again. And that's how, then when I press the space bar, I already kind of found it, it goes back there. But if I was listening to a big chunk of audio to just listen to it, maybe to put markers in and see where I messed up or something, if you have record on stop or return on stop, it means that, like, if I listen to 20 minutes and then press the spacebar again, it's going to go back to the beginning of where I started. So it's just something to be aware of. It's really easy to turn on and off. It's an interface, return on stop. That's it. And advanced, to finally answer the question that somebody asked, where do you turn on the or off the importing, auto leveling? It's here in this last tab over here, which is advanced. Okay. And it's the first option here. And that's basically it.
Jonathan, are there any circumstances where you might use higher sample rates or higher bit rates? Or is it pretty pointless for radio or podcast?
No, is the simple answer. No. If you had like a client or something that specifically asked for something, you can change this. You do have these other options without going down a rabbit hole here. These are things that are technically possible, which is why they are in here. There's a really good argument that anything past this level of fidelity is not able to be heard by the human ear. So this is essentially all arbitrary, certainly the last two. And what this has to do with bits, again, you could have the bit rate be 24-bit as well. You will not hear any difference. You will make the file, the program work harder and have the file be larger, but you won't make any difference that you will be able to hear at all. It has to do with the audio. It's a digital audio thing, and it has to do with how the program is taking in the actual audio from sound waves and putting it into the digital format. This is just how all recording programs work. And so it's how many samples it's doing is basically what it is. You would not have to change that. Likely, if somebody asks, the only thing they would ever ask for would be 48. If that happens, you can do it. You can change it there. Basically, you don't have to worry about it.
But presumably most playback devices can't do more than 48 anyway, or 96 if it's really modern.
Yep. It's just not a thing that's, the reality is, okay, here's another thing with this. When you bring the audio into Hindenburg, if you imported anything you're recording, any of this stuff that's in here, this is all in the format of waveform, which means sort of pure audio in its natural kind of state. When you send this off, we might as well start talking about exporting and such. Most likely, your clients or other places and other things are going to ask for more than likely an MP3. Now, there's no difference in the performance or anything like that. The only difference is the actual quality of the audio itself. Here's the reason they're asking for an MP3 for, if you're, let's say podcasts, right? You could give whomever a WAV file. It's a much larger file. But when they put it on their platform and when you stream it, the listener, you will be streaming an MP3 anyway. So you may that's why they say just give us the MP3, because what's going to go out is not going to be a wave anyway. If somebody asks you for that, you can do that. I'll show you that in a second. You can give them waveforms or anything, wave files or anything like that. It's the same thing. It just has to do with how much basically the digital information, digital fidelity is there. You don't really have to worry about it. If you listen to one versus the other, you say it's the same thing. If you A/B them, you might be able to hear on like nice, headphones and such, a different level of quality, but it's not really anything you have to worry about. But it will impact how big the file is. And again, that actually does matter when you have like an audiobook that's 5 hours long, if it's 5 hours of a wave file versus 5 hours of an MP3. What it does is it's compressing it.
I would back up what Jonathan says. The radio station I do my show for, we have to present our files in 320 kilobits per second. And it's transmitted at that, but many radio stations transmit at 128. The BBC transmits at 128 on all its internet radio. Apart from occasionally very high quality broadcasts, we use 320.
There you go. Let's talk about exporting a selection of this stuff anyway. And then this is one of the kind of fundamental features of what's going to separate out narrator from pro for those folks who maybe have one and not the other. One is what I'll get to in the next part, which is opening text up in the manuscript and all of that. But let's just talk about exporting in general, okay? So when stuff goes into this, you could import a file, and stuff has to come out of it. Exporting. That's basically what it is. Importing and exporting. So if you hit export here, it's just going to export this thing that my beautiful, beautiful piece of audio that I've recorded here. It's just going to go from beginning to end, and whatever you say to do, it's going to do. Okay, so let's say I just go to export, and this comes up. It looks a little bit different on Windows than Mac, but it's the same stuff. This is what I mean. It's a WAV file. You could export it as an MP3. All that will be coming out of this is just audio. Okay, it's a stereo file. You could, if you made it a mono track, it would basically be, if you see the size of the file here, it's essentially half the size because the stereo is two of them, just coming out of two channels. Okay, and under options, you could do different things like we talked about with the sample rate. You could change that. You're probably not going to have to do any of that, but it's some other options if you wanted to. But what will come out of that is just one thing. That's that. But I wanted to show you this, and this is something. This export menu has a drop down, and it has these different things. I have a few more than you are going to see on yours because of like a different version of it. Okay, but it doesn't matter. The ones I'm going to show you, you have access to. Okay, so the whole purpose of this is that if you wanted to, this is making a demo that would be out there for ACX. And again, we'll look at this again, and we'll put links into the chat as well. Alan might have already done that, or Emma might do that too, where we've got some videos that go over this again. So if you have your demo here, you can have it go through this validator. Okay, so what this is when you make an audiobook for ACX. And for those folks who don't know, ACX is I'm sure many of you are ACX members. It is the platform where you as narrators would make your demo and have, do auditions and stuff and have your page with your stuff on it. And then me, let's just say, as the book author would come in and listen to your stuff, I would hire you to record my book. Basically is what it is. It's the marketplace for that. And it's the place ACX takes the completed book after you've done it and puts it on Audible. That's how that works. So ACX is going to take the book when you're done with it, and they are going to run it through this thing called a validator. And what the validator does is it checks it for certain things. And there are standards for everything. And there are standards for podcasts, which is different than audiobooks. And the reason for that is so that all audiobooks are kind of the same volume, that there's not a lot of noise and such. So if you go to ACX's website, and you go to like technical specs, or I forget exactly what it's called, you'll see this list of stuff and saying like RMS and RMS-A weighted, and it's like, what is all that? It's referring to all this stuff. Like, it's referring to, so you don't have one part of your book super loud, another part super quiet. So that's why auto leveling as you go is a great way to kind of guarantee that. But after this, so there's a standard. Like if anybody has gone through this process, they know it stinks, which is that you've done all this work for an audiobook and then you send it off to ACX and then they send it back to you and say it was wrong because of this or because of that. So you have this option here of this validator, which is called export for ACX. And so what it's going to do is it's going to make sure that it's the right level. It's going to put on this plugin here. By the way, here's where all the plugins, which means effects. Here's where all the effects come in. It's right over here in this narration area, this little fader thing. And here are these effects. These are the ones that come with Hindenburg. These are all just ones I happen to have. It just will find it, so you can use third-party effects as well. But when I run it through this validator, is what it's going to do is it's going to look at the noise floor. What noise floor is the amount of like if I recorded this and I didn't say anything, it would still be sound here, right? And if I was recording and it was really noisy, that's basically the noise floor, the background noise. So they don't want a noisy audiobook. So they say it has to be this level of noise floor. And it has to be this level of loud, not too much, and it has to be consistent. That's what the RMS is referring to. So we've just automated that. So if you do this export for ACX business, it will run it through this. It says it corrected your pauses because it actually you need a little bit of pause at the beginning and at the end and that kind of thing. So it actually put on a little bit of room tone. It said, well, the levels seem okay. That's kind of because I did the auto leveling thing. And then it put on this noise reduction. And when I go over here and I look in these effects, it's put on this noise reduction plugin to kind of adjust to how much noise is there. And it puts on this has to do with that final leveling of the audio. So even though you're not making an audiobook, if you're doing it for ACX and at the end you will have to do this, you might as well get used to doing it. And you now can do this in Hindenburg where you can just run it through there. So you don't have to do that when you export, but it's something I would recommend. Okay, which is like if you recorded your demo, I like these sentences I made, but I want to just make sure it's used, up to ACX specs anyway. You could run it through that validator. And I'll be revisiting this throughout. So it's okay if this is like too much or anything like that.
Jonathan, could I just quickly ask whether the room tone is recorded then automatically? It said in your clip that it's added room tone, that I wasn't sure how to do that. So it automatically records room tone?
No. What it does, which is a little confusing, to be honest. Okay. So what it does is it analyzes when you have chapter headings and such, which we'll kind of get into a little later. There's standards for that too. They want to make sure that you don't have 4 seconds of silence before you say chapter 2, because that's not a great audiobook. So this will actually, if you had too much silence, it'll cut it away. If you didn't have enough, it would actually take a little sliver of that silence and pop it in. So one thing with your ACX book is that you need I think it's 0.5 seconds of room tone at the end. By the way, room tone, for those folks who don't know, room tone is recorded silence, okay? So you just record the place that you're in with your, you're doing your recording. And I'm going to show you some tools with this that'll really help you out. You just record nothing. And the reason for that is the silence that you're hearing isn't like a digital space. It would be room tone. I'll just show you what that sounds like for a sec. Again, I'm doing stuff like arbitrarily here. Okay, so let's say this was deleted. For that. And what I would recommend, okay, so it's a bad cut. You wouldn't do this anyway, okay? but let's just say I wanted to put some room tone in there. I'll explain this little thing I just brought up in a minute. But let's say I had some room tone in there instead. That I would recommend. It's still silence, but it's not the harsh kind of digital silence. And especially if you have any like background noise, it sounds really, really obvious when you have a digital cut. So that's what room tone is. That's why they recommend it. What it did when it ran through the validation. Let's go back a few steps. And it take these off. So it's got nothing in it, and we're going to run it through this validator. It will say, hey, you don't have enough time at the beginning of your file here at 0. So it's going to put it in. It's going to basically do what it does when, in between, before a chapter heading, it's going to take that little sliver of space and make a chunk of it. The downside I do have to mention is that if you started your recording like right on it, which I did here, because there's nothing for it to kind of latch onto, it's actually like this thing that I said, this is right at 0, and whatever I start with is cool. I start right on the word. It's me going cool. There's no space in between, so it's just gonna take the first little bit of what I said and go cool. So a way to avoid that is to just when you do the recording, leave a little bit of space, and it'll just fix it for you automatically. That's one way of doing it. Another thing to keep in mind with this is these things up here, I wanted to talk about it anyway, but cut, copy, paste, that stuff. Cut is probably pretty clear. Cut is if I made a selection, I cut this out, the two parts on either side are going to snap together like this. Okay, so if you wanted to cut out a little click, you can cut it out. I'm doing that by pressing X. You also could hit the little cut button up here. Okay, but every time you make a cut, it's going to have the two parts collapse, which means it moves it where it is on the timeline. That's this right here, like how much real life time has gone by. So it is something to keep in mind. If you cut out this section, everything else shifts on the timeline. Paste, copy is when you copy something like this. And just like Microsoft Word, Command C, and then if you can go Command V, and it'll put it wherever that the playhead is, that white line. Pasting is when you make a selection like this. I'm going to do this with a bit of room tone so you can see it. So here's this bit of room tone, right? And if I copy this, Command C, and I make a selection here, and I go Command V, just kind of like what we did before, it's only going to go in that area that I selected. Okay, what inserting does is wherever this is, it's going to just take this and push stuff off. It's going to insert its way in there. Insert is very assertive, if that makes any sense. Okay, so insert would be pushing in the room tone. This is how you could push stuff off to the side if you ever had to do that as well. So I'm saying all that because if you wanted to, you're back at the beginning and you wanted a little bit of space there, that's what I would do, is just insert some in. And now if I ran it through this exporter, it actually cut it down because it corrected the pause and made it so that it's like the half a second that ACX would want. Does that make sense?
Sure. Just a question. If you needed, for example, 3 seconds of room tone, but your sample was only 1 second long,
yeah,
do you have to insert it 3 times like you did, or can you make it stretch it automatically?
Well, if you had
Not stretch it, but to duplicate it automatically, should I say?
You could duplicate it automatically. You also could just, if you needed 3 seconds of room tone, what I would suggest, by the way, is just record and then select 3 seconds of it. By the way, on the bottom of the screen, now I have the zoom thing in the way, where these numbers are, I should just let you know this, the in, out stuff. When you make a selection, you click and drag, it says in, meaning the in marker, out, meaning the out marker, and time, meaning how long is. So the thing I selected is 29 seconds. So if I wanted to record 3 seconds of room tone, I would just record silence for however long you wanted to and make a selection. So you got about 3 seconds in there. And then I would just put that in the favorites window, which I'm going to show you in a second. And the reason for that is that you can just pull these out over and over again. Like this one's 2 seconds, this one's 1 second. You kind of always have access to it. But yes, you could, if you had a 1 second room tone like that, you could just copy it and paste it twice. And then you would have, 3 of these. And there's your 3 seconds of room tone. Yes, you could do that. You also can do this thing. See how these are all split into different chunks? Now, I don't know. I'm going to show you something. This is like off kilter here. It just kind of came up. But you can consolidate this to be one big chunk again. Okay? If you select regions that are all next to each other, by the way I did that for those folks playing at home is I held down the shift key, and when I click back here, it's going to take this region that I started off with and this one that I ended up with and select everything in the middle. If I did that by pressing Control, sorry, I didn't do it. If I did that by pressing Control, it would just select that one and that one. But if I did Shift, it would have everything in the middle. Just the thing. If you right click, you have this option of consolidate. And what this does, and this is definitely off topic, but you could turn this back into one big region again to move around and do stuff with if you wanted to.
And that doesn't affect the auto leveling later. I think
No,
the merge command does.
It does. No, it does, because the way auto leveling works is that it auto levels, it analyzes each individual region. So if you turn this whole thing, if you had a bunch of different levels and you put it all as one big region, it's just going to take the whole thing and turn it up or down, as opposed to different gradations. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, it would.
I was experimenting with Pro, so every now and again it would throw up an error saying it couldn't auto level
Right.
a particular region, which had been, I think they called it merged rather than consolidated.
Yeah, it's called merge there, because yeah, it does basically the same thing. But yes, so all of that there, a lot of stuff there. One other thing I did want to just touch upon is, let me go back a sec. So this looks like a horror show. Well, how would I get rid of it? I'd just cut it away. That's how you do it. You just press X. Let's say this is, I have this here, but I just wanted to export a selection. This often happens if you have, this is more for voiceover kind of things where you just need to give an example of something you're working on. Okay. So your producer or something like that says, show me a clip of it. Often comes up with e-learning and those sorts of things. You can make a selection and you can only export that selection. That's a way that you can do this as well. So I made a selection here, and there's this other option, which is, so again, just to review, if I go to export, it gives me one big thing of audio. If I go do this ACX thing, just for a demo, it'll be that thing of audio. It'll just run it through some of those ACX plugins for the overall volume and noise floor. If I do this export selection, the reason for this is that you're saying, I just want to export only this part, and this part will come out on its own, like it's a sentence or whatever it is, and you could just show somebody that. You would right click, just like we've been doing a little bit here, and you have this export selection option. And if you choose that, it's the same exact menu, except you even says selection. It's only the piece that you highlighted. Okay. It works also if you just clicked on only this region, like you clicked on it and that one was highlighted, it will work that way too. Do the same thing, export selection, and it'll go out. Just that piece. So if you wanted to do that, you could do that too.
And that bit, Jonathan, just so I'm clear, you can't actually clean that bit up. It doesn't do the ACX stuff that the other one did.
You could sort of, yes, you can kind of trick it into doing it. And the way you do that is that you actually run it through the validator first, right? Which I actually already did. Okay, so you're like, okay, do you want to continue export? No. And then you could say, hey, just export this part and then you would have these effects that are on it. So just so the way this stuff works is any effects that you have here, whenever you export something, they will then be written to the file, meaning they're on the piece of audio that you exported. That's because it's this non-destructive type of audio. If it's Audacity is destructive, and all that means is that when you put an effect on this piece of audio, like a big reverb, let's say, so you can hear it, and then you save the file, that big reverb that you put on there is going to be there. It's just there. But here, if you put some big crazy reverb on and you saved it, and you open up the next day, you're like, oh, that was a terrible idea, I want to take it off. You can just take it off. But if you exported it that big and you had it on, the reverb, it would be there. So hopefully that all makes sense.
Absolutely. Just two more quick things, if I may. One is the room tone at the beginning and the end of the book only, or is it the beginning and of each chapter?
When you have a full book, which we're just looking at like a demo, just one piece of audio, and it is at the beginning and the end of our 30-second clip that we're going to send off. When you have a full book with chapters and such, which I hopefully will get to, it will be the beginning and the end, and for the chapters.
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the other thing, when you were doing the demonstration there, I could hear the clicking, and I did one audition the other day where, because as we've talked about the trackpad, there were two sort of noises of the trackpad. Is there any way of getting that out, whether apart from just doing a retake, but is there anything that would get that out, that noise? If
the best thing to do, there's not an automated way to do that. What I do in real life is I use this narration bar. It works exactly. This will get into when you're referring to the clicks, like the clicks when you press the right arrow key and that kind of thing.
Yes, I mean, I was actually scrolling down on the page, so I was reading and I was moved the page down, but actually because it's the trackpad made a slight noise as it was sort of on the table, and that you could hardly hear it, but it was the feedback that I got saying, what was that extraneous noise? And it turned out it was actually the trackpad, and it was just, I mean, obviously now I know it, you just do another take, I guess, but I just wondered whether there was any way of getting rid of that.
Yes, that would be covering it with room tones. Let's just talk about this now. So let's say here was your trackpad noise. Okay. Anything that's in the file, like underneath you speaking, is really hard to get rid of. So this is a thing I see a lot with narrators when they are like doing commercial kind of work, like cartoon stuff. And we've all seen those clips of narrators who are like being very animated, like actors and that sort of thing, for maybe a movie, an animated movie, or voiceover or something. And I think then sometimes people get into a booth where you are sound isolated, and the only thing the microphone is picking up is your voice, and it's just you. So any sound that you make is on that microphone, and they're going around, and it's a lot of like clothing shuffling noise while they're speaking. It's like the whole book sounds like so. As much as you could not have stuff go in the first place, it's better. But noise isn't so. But any noises that happen in the spaces, like you're reading along and then I don't know if you could hear that, but I'm clicking very loudly. I make a big click sound, and it's in the file, right? That is another thing that you can do with editing, and what you can do with room tone. So there's this little window here that I brought up, which is called the favorites. The favorites window, and every window I'm going to bring up is in this view drop-down menu. So these menus up top, it's view, and there are these different things, okay? And one of them is called the favorites. And the favorites window is where you can just store little clips of audio, okay? So I could take some bit of audio, like some room tone. I'll just do it. What the heck? Here's some room tone. This is me speaking, and what I would recommend. Okay. All right. That was my not very room tone, but you get the idea. I'll tell you what, I'll just take this piece, which is pretty quiet. Okay. And I'm going to bring it in here. Okay. The way I did that is that I made a selection. I could also just click on this whole thing if it were, good. But I made a selection in this case. Okay. And I held down a key in this case, the Option key or Alt on Windows, and I held it down and I dragged that in here. Okay. You also could just copy this, Command C, and come in here and Command V. You could do it like that too. But I'm just so used to doing this other way. So this is an audio editing thing in general. If you hold down Option, it makes a copy of whatever you're doing. If you hold down Command, it cuts and it pastes it. Okay, so it takes it from one spot and puts it to the other. So you can do the same thing, but holding down Command or Control, same thing, Control on Windows. It'll cut it from there and put it in here. Okay, so probably the Option is better just because you didn't remove it from the file. But all I did was that, okay? And then, so that's how I got stuff into this favorites window. Now, the way the favorites window works is that and when I started like a new session, anything that was brought in here is just here for the new session. So it's a way to just have stuff, at the ready. You can rename these anything that you want to, and all kinds of stuff there. Okay, that got really crazy for a second. All right, so I'm just going to get rid of some of these. But the idea with your, let me go back some steps. Okay. So I did a lot of crazy stuff there. We were originally looking at, let's say this was hypothetically your keyboard click sound. If you make a highlight over the area you want to get rid of, you can do a couple things. One is you could cut it away, but that has that problem of it changes the timing, it changes the space, right? So the other option is you could paste some room tone over this, and you could drag it out like that, or you could, if you right click here, and if you make a little selection, and then you right click up here, you can paste it and it will paste in that clip. And again, there are keyboard shortcuts for all this stuff. So you just kind of, very, very quickly paste stuff in. You have to click here and then you go like that. So that's those, but when you paste over the noise, that will kind of cover that space up. That's what I would recommend doing. You also could just delete it. If you don't want to deal with any of this stuff, you could just press delete. It'll just delete it, whatever you want to. Like that.
Or you could highlight it and just drag it the volume down to a very low level to avoid the
like that.
The ultimate blank, the complete
right.
silence.
My thought is if you're going to do that, you might as well just cover it with room tone, and just paste it in there.
Yes, we're talking about, it isn't a pause. It was during the narration that actually it was me scrolling the page down that made the noise. So I understand what you're saying. I just think that maybe that's not quite, because I wouldn't put room tone over the top of the narration, would I? I'd lose the
Yeah, that's tricky. Noises that happen while you are speaking are just kind of in the audio. So they are this part that you're trying to, show off. So try not to do that if you can.
Okay.
That's basically the answer. But yeah, that would be a re-record. Same thing. It's a common one. This is my mic that I use for voiceover stuff. It's one of these. In my particular setup, I just have it like on a table, right? And it's really easy to bump the table, isn't it? You get this big thud sound or something. Just something else to keep in mind. That's a very common thing there, was that you go doof, or you just hit the table, that the mic is on, or the arm, or whatever, stuff like that. If that happens while you are in recording, like actually speaking, it's in the word. There are filters and stuff that you can do to run it through. I would just say re-record it. It's just so much easier. Great questions. Here, I'm going to move on to some other stuff though. So we talked about, a bunch of this, all this business here: input monitoring, knowing the workspace, recording, punching in, recording selections, all that stuff. And we talked about this exporting for ACX function. I'm going to revisit that a little bit. It's just a way that, again, the idea with Hindenburg in particular is that automate this stuff to make your life easier is the idea. So those technical parts, if you can make that go a little faster, it makes life easier. For a couple of John and Jane both have Pro, and Pro is our software that's made for podcasting. So it doesn't have this ACX function. It's not really relevant to that. But what it does have is publishing. So basically, and there's a different standard of loudness for that stuff, which is LUFS. And so LUFS is just a measure of loudness of the overall thing you're giving them. Like let's say it's a podcast of the four of us chatting for a couple minutes. We give them, that's our podcast. It's got to be this level of loud, and they say have it be the standard. So what people do is you have a meter, and it's kind of reading along and measuring how loud it is. But we just made it so it's like you just say at the end, make it this loud, and it just does that when you export it. And then you can publish it, just meaning that it goes directly to your podcasting hosting site. Okay. And again, just this thing of your demo, you want to have little clips that show off your range as a performer. Okay. So what this does is it fixes the volume for ACX specs and fixes the noise floor. That's kind of the most important thing. And if you're not used to it, just get used to meeting specs and all this stuff. You might as well be prepared for what's happening. And another thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that if Morgan Freeman were narrating a book and he gave it to ACX and they said, oh, it's got the wrong RMS level, it wouldn't mean that Morgan Freeman stinks as a narrator, right? It's just a technical thing that you have to kind of deal with. I wanted to look at the real life scenario of opening up text in Hindenburg for doing an audition. And again, I'll put links in at the end of these videos that are made that exactly walk you through the process. Like, here's how you make a demo, here's how you do an audition, and here's how you do the full book. But something to keep in mind that is going to come up. So the whole idea here is that you can open up text inside of Hindenburg. That's what that manuscript is for. And then a book which has structured like chapters and parts, it could have very complicated structure. All of that structure, if it was made in the file when the person wrote it, it will appear that way. And the reason that matters, I'll get back to this at the end again, is that audiobooks are long, right? So when you send your thing off to ACX, one of the other things they're going to ask for, if you're doing a full book, is don't give us a 10-hour long audio file. They don't want that. They want it in basically bite-sized chunks. Well, how would you separate up a 10 chapter book? You'd separate it out by the chapters. So what most people end up doing is they record separately, like chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3. So you have these like different files with different things going on. And the way it works in Hindenburg is you could have all that in one place, and when you export it, all the chapters just export out automatically. That's what that's what structure is. But we're going to look at a step before that, which is, let's say you're going to do the audition part. I did this today, and I'm going to show you what I did today. Okay, so you're going to open up a text document. We'll talk a little bit about narration view and different ways you can look at it, and reset layout, which we actually kind of already looked at. And then I thought it'd be good to talk about editing and some of these other things, which we sort of did a little bit, but maybe elaborate more if there's time. Okay, so back here in the old Hindenburg, here's what I mean. I went to ACX and I looked at the page and I picked a book and I went to the audition tab. In fact, I might actually just play a video that just covers this exact thing. In fact, I'm going to do that. That's what's happening next. Okay. Because it's just easier to show you exactly what happens, and then I'll show you kind of in real life. Okay. All right. Okay, can everybody see that? All right.
In our first video in this series,
we talked a bit about how to do a basic recording and how to export your file. The goal was to make a demo for your ACX profile. And as we stated before, the exact same process will work for Findaway Voices if you are a Findaway member. In this video, we're going to talk about the next step in the process, which is making an audition for a book that you would like to narrate. ACX has a page that shows the titles accepting auditions. Once you pick the one that you think is right for you, you can locate the Audition tab. There you can see the audition script that is either text that you can copy into a docx, usually a Word document, or a downloadable PDF. What we are going to do is open the text in Hindenburg Narrator, but there's a step in between if it's a PDF. You'll have to convert the PDF to text, meaning a docx like Microsoft Word. There are many free options online that you can use to do this. Narrator has a special ability to sync the audio you are recording with the text we open in the manuscript. The reason that PDF doesn't work is that it's actually a picture of a text file and not the text itself. Let's look at how we can open a text file so that it appears in the manuscript. Choose Open and select the file we want. It's just that simple. You can see at the bottom of the window that there are many different types of files that will open up. Select your text file just as you would a Hindenburg session, and you'll see the text appears in the manuscript. When that happens, you get a new way to record. It's as simple as pressing the right arrow key. Now when you are recording, if you click the right arrow key again, you will see two things happen. The first is that Hindenburg will cycle through the body of your text, and also a navigation point will be put in. What this nav point does is to sync up the text with the audio. Now if you have to do a re-record, a correction, you can click on the text to do it. After you've got the audio that you want, it will be a good time to put any EQ or compression on to enhance your voice if you want to. When you've completed your audition, you can run it through the validation process just as you did with your demo. This will be the same recording workflow that you will use to record your full audiobook. It consists of record, edit out mistakes, enhance the sound, and run it through the export validator. Next, we'll look at recording a full book.
Okay. All right. Oh no. Okay. So yeah, that kind of walks you through the process of it. I do feel like a science teacher or something playing a video in class. It always feels weird to play a video in a live thing. But I did this, today. I downloaded a text file and converted it, which took it took 10 seconds to do it. And here it is. So if I open up a text file, this is an audition from Amazon, from ACX, whatever, same thing. It came as a PDF and I made it into a docx. Okay, and then when you go to open, it's one big text file that looks like this. Okay, so this will work with anything that you have that is, a text file. So this is like 1 page long, or 2 pages, kind of a long audition, geez. But that's what this is. Now, if you're a voiceover person who is doing this, or this is the same kind of stuff that comes in for, e-learning or, corporate things, you get a script that you have to read. So the whole idea here is make it so you can open up that script in the program, and then you can do all the stuff here, okay? So when you have the text there, again, just like the video said, I went to open and I just opened up the file, and then it opens up in the manuscript. And it calls it just book when it's just one big book. Now, this contents window here, I'll show you this in a more complicated book, Alan's favorite book of all time, which is Bridget Jones's Diary. It would work on any book. So if you had a book that was filled with chapters and such, you'll see that that's all here in this contents window. But if you don't, if it's just one big text file, it just is one thing, comes up as book. All right. And then it basically works the same way. You arm the track and you'd record, except with those differences. Okay. So one of them is that, and by the way, all the voiceover you heard me do in that video, I did this way. I just I type it up and I open it up in the manuscript. I actually use a clickless mouse, which I'll show you a little bit of that. But once this is here, if you press the right arrow key, Mac and Windows is the same. Now I'm recording. The Master Charles Chancellor in his hand, da 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 da. The Master walked up to the podium, flanked by 3. Thank you for attending this emergency meeting of our esteemed order. Okay, every time that while it was in the process of recording, while it was read, when I pressed the right arrow key, what happened is it put in that navigation point, which just syncs up the text. And so if you can see, when I click on like this second sort of area here, it goes to this nav point. When I click on this one, it goes to this nav point. And that matters a lot more when you have a complicated book. Everything else works the same way, like pickups and such. So I forget where I was, but let's just say I do a pickup. I'm just going to press the right arrow key. Podium, flanked by 3. Thank you for attending this emergency meeting of our esteemed da 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 da. You would never hear normalcies, please for return, all that kind of stuff. So that's the way that it works here. Is you do that and you open up a text document. It opens up in the manuscript and you record just by pressing the right arrow key. You also have this option of in the view drop-down menu. Some people like to do this where I open something called the narration view. That's where I found it, is in the view drop-down menu. It looks like this. What this is, it works the same exact way, except that you can put this in full screen and just have the text on there if you only wanted the text. Some people also like to do this. If you have 2 monitors, you put the text on one just so you can have it, in 2 places. Some folks like to do that too. This is handy for one thing. I don't personally use this. I want to see the waveform. I like the way it's set up without this because I can still see the text. It's up to you. But one thing that this is good for, to be honest, and kind of the bane of narrators' existences is like is consistency for audiobooks, especially because it's long. It takes a long time to do, and so mic placement consistency is tricky if you're not used to it. It's very easy to kind of move around, and or if you're reading from a physical book, this happens a lot. I'm reading. The mic's here. I'm reading. I get to the bottom of the book, and then I go back to the top of the book. My voice is in a different place in proximity to the mic. I'll just show you on my prop mic here. It's a real mic. Your mic, however you got it set up, it's on an arm, it's on a table, whatever. If you're reading like this and then you're changing where your voice is in comparison to the mic. That's all I'm saying. The narration view actually is really good for that, where since you're reading it from a screen, if you had the mic in front of you, you're just kind of reading it like this. The mic is here. You're reading along. You can cycle through it and not have to really move. So a little detail there. Okay, so that's how that part of it works. And then there's a few ways you can do this. Again, you can do this rewinding thing to do pickups. And this is what I meant by you can actually run the whole program with one hand. You could just sort of rewind, find your spot. This emergency meeting of our esteemed. If you didn't want to hear your stuff and you wanted to rewind, you could just press the. Whoops, sorry. I lied. Never mind. Don't just ignore what I'm saying. Okay. If you wanted to do the rewinding thing, you can. You don't have to. And then when you record, thank you for attending this emergency meeting. Right arrow key. Thank you for attending this emergency meeting. Our esteemed order. When you're ready for the next part, you hear normalcies, please for return. He sneered venomously. Don't narrate like I'm narrating. That's another good tip. Don't do that like that. It's just for an example. I should probably, because that's kind of a lot of different things there, but I should probably just check in. Does all that make sense to you folks there on the stage?
I have one kind of, can you hear me okay? I switched to my mic. I have one small question. Can you make that view larger? Like, can you enlarge the text if you're doing the reading, if you want to see it bigger?
Yes. You click, by the way, for those folks who aren't used to doing this, it takes a little bit to get used to if you're working from other DAWs because they don't have the text there. You can, by holding down, same zoom in and out works. You'll just do it in this window. So if you wanted to do like that or like this, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just, why would you do this? You know, you wouldn't, but yes, you can zoom in and out to see it larger or smaller, and you can resize the window. And you could also, should you want to do this for some reason, you could make this, you can dock it in different places. You also could make this really tiny, though you would never want to do this. You know, Zoom is so great. I have this one complaint. You know that little bar when you're sharing your screen that's got all the stuff there? There's no way to grab it easily, to move it out of the way. Okay, you could do this. You could read only one sentence at a time if you wanted to. But whatever you did, if you mess this up, stuff seems like it got off kilter or whatever. If you remember, if you go to window, you have this option of reset layout. It will always just revert it back to like the default. Okay. So yes, you have to click into the window, and you also can go back. I'm not sure this exactly comes up. There is a key command to very quickly go from the workspace to the manuscript. But if you're not going to do that, I can tell you what that is. But if you're not going to do that, you can click on the text and come back down here. So that's a way of doing this. If I was doing my audition for the book, again, with that, you did your stuff, you're reading, you open up the text here. Hopefully it makes your life a little easier that way. By the way, I said I would say some differences between narrator and pro. This is kind of one of them. These navigation points, these little yellow markers here, which sync the text and the audio. You can see it every time I click on them. They're going to different spots in the audio, in the text, and vice versa. You click in the text, it goes to different spots in the audio. That does not exist in Pro. It's just a narrator function because you're narrating. And the exporting, kind of the same stuff. And I'm just going to go over that a few times because the idea is that then when you get to the last part, like I want to export like for the book, let's say step one was recording, a demo to put on your website. You record some stuff, you export it, as MP3s, whatever, you upload it for your ACX site, you got your different clips. Then you have to audition for a book, which is what the video is about. And you go to audition, they got a sample script, and that's what you got to give them. Our thinking is like just be able to open up the sample script and record it right here, one place. So you do that, and you could again run it through the validator. Okay, so you'd go, if you wanted to, you could export for ACX. It'll say same thing. We prick pauses, everything looks good. We put the I keep saying yes. I don't want to actually export these. Here's our noise reduction and that final audiobook process thing, and there you go. So it would be what your audiobook would have to be anyway. That's kind of the approach with that. And because I haven't been able to keep up with the chat, I see you out there, folks, and I wish we all could chat together. But Emma, if you're there from the VoiceOver Network, there are a fair amount of questions kind of adding up. So maybe we could talk about some of those.
I think, to be honest, Jonathan, you've answered a lot of them as we've gone along, even whether you've seen them or not. I know Aubrey had asked, would you use the same section if you wanted to highlight and increase a low volume section, say like in a podcast with a guest? I think you may have answered that one. Okay.
Yes. So if you wanted to, so one thing I should say, another pretty big difference just right off the bat between narrator and pro defaults to having multiple tracks because you're making a podcast. So it assumes at least two people speaking, maybe music track, that kind of thing. Narrator, again, it's just the one track of audio. You can add more tracks. It's very easy if you wanted to, okay? You can you right click here and you can add track. and you could change the order of these and stuff, and then you could have, you'd have 2 tracks now. So I'm only doing this just to show you that the question, I think, was something like, let's say you had, let's just say hypothetically, this was a podcast, this person on track 1. By the way, you should probably if you are doing podcasts, get in the habit, especially of naming your tracks. When you start getting a lot of tracks, it's easy to get them messed up. But you can, yes, if you wanted to just lower the overall volume of these, you could just select everything that's on this track and turn it down. I think that's what the question was. Something else folks should know about, this is more applicable for podcasting. Because in audiobooks, see how this like digital space that's here, you really won't have that. It's just going to be more like room tone, and everything is like contiguous. Because again, this stuff sounds like digital silence, which it is. Do you remember how I said if you make a highlight and you cut something, things snap here, right? I promise they will. So, I'm pressing the wrong button. That's why. Remember how it snaps like that? Okay. If I make a selection in space, meaning where there's nothing, and there's audio to this either side of that, when I cut away the space, it will also snap together. Okay. And that works the same way also if I copied and inserted space. So I just copied this bit of silence. Now, if I went to insert it, it's going to push this stuff away because it's just pushing. So if you ever wanted to like just add some space somewhere or something like that, that's just a way to do it. That's all. That's more applicable for podcasts.
Jonathan, sorry,
yes.
Could I just ask, in the video, you had a section about where you could alter the audio in some way before the ACX export to do with enhancing and condensing, etc. Where do you find that section again?
Okay, so that was referring to effects, and let's look at that actually. So two effects that it's going to put on if you run it through the validator have to do with the audiobook, the overall loudness. So you're not going to like hear that necessarily. It's more of a technical one, and then noise reduction, which I'll give you an example with a really noisy file here. Okay, so here's this absurd file. Don't record like this.
They launched a website called One Frame of Fame.
Okay, so this is a little trick too, or something to keep in mind for how to use effects or how to hear them and such. Basically, start with it off and then turn it on. That's why there's this on and off button. If you're in another program or have other third-party effects, there'll be a little button, and it will often say, instead of on off, it'll say bypass. Same thing, bypass it or hear it with it on. So whenever you're wondering what am I hearing with the effect, hear it with it on and off. And then I'll show you this with EQ, especially like, make sure you're hearing it. Like, what does it do when I turn the mids all the way up? And then it's going to probably sound terrible, and then kind of adjust down from there. But I would select a little area of, whatever you wanted to hear. And then I just play this selection, the small part. And the only reason I'm saying that is just so that the cursor doesn't just keep going and going and going. Just being able to like easily loop a section and play it is nice. Again, the shortcut for that is I made a selection, click and drag. You also can press I and O, and then you press Shift and Space Bar.
A website called One Frame of Fame.
It'll just play the part that's in the selection. Okay, so I'm just going to do this little bit here, and then I'm going to turn up the plugin and hear what it sounds like. This is an extreme example for the purposes of example. Your stuff won't sound like this.
They launched a website called One Frame.
Okay, that's with it off, and then you turn it on.
They launched a website called One Frame of Fame. They launched a website called One Frame of Fame.
And it is not.
They launched a website called One Frame of Fame. They launched a website called One Frame of Fame.
Okay, so with it off.
They launched a website called One Frame.
And with it on.
They launched a website called One Frame of Fame.
And you could adjust and such from there to hear what it's doing and all of that. That's the overall workflow I would do to putting on an effect. Your stuff is not going to sound like this absurd example, I hope, all right? But it's the same kind of process with EQ or a compressor. And then I might as well talk to you about this kind of special thing that we have here, which is this voice profiler. The goal of it is just to kind of simplify that. So maybe I'll start with EQ first and compressor first. So the idea with Hindenburg is to make the world's simplest effects, because it comes out of this tradition of making it easy for people to use who aren't recording engineers. So there are many parameters to a compressor. There's basically 5, and there's 5 in this one, but they're just sort of hidden away so that you're just turning up the amount of it. Okay, and if you're not sure what a compressor is, maybe you don't need it that much. But essentially, it is. Well, let me maybe start here. If you want to hear it and hear what it does, maybe take some clip of audio and do the exact same thing. This is for attending this emergency meeting. Okay, I'll turn everything else off for the moment. All right. So here's the audio with no effects. Thank you for attending this emergency meeting. And then I'd do the same thing. I'd loop it. Maybe hear what is it off? What is it kind of with it, pretty high up? Okay, thank you for attending this emergency. Here's with it on. Okay, thank you for attending this emergency meeting. So it adds this kind of thickness, and the reason for that is a compressor is basically a few things, but it's sort of taking the high parts of your audio, and there are low parts to your audio, and it's sort of squishing them to kind of meet in the middle. But what it will also do is if you had like this noisy this horror show here, all that terrible background, if you put a compressor on that, it's going to take all that stuff too, and you cranked it up, it'll take all that and bring it up too. So it's just something to keep in mind. With any of these, the reason our stuff is designed the way that it is because this is supposed to be like fine tuning, icing on the cake. I like this little makeup analogy that, you can put makeup on so that everybody is aware that you have it on. You also can put makeup on in a way that nobody is aware that you have it on, but it enhances what's already there. It would be the second one is how we're approaching, the effects would be for vocal audio. You're not going to put crazy effects on an audiobook. They're just meant to hear your performance. But if you wanted to add a little, do things, add a little bit of EQ, compression and such, those are ways that you can do that. There's this other way, which is just the way to make life easy, which is called the voice profiler. And what this is if you have a bit of audio that you like, that you recorded well, and that you wanted to emulate for future recordings, like this is my sound, I want to just have it be there. You could learn this. You could learn that profile, and basically what it does is it makes a custom EQ from that thing that it's learning, and it puts on a small amount of compression, which you can turn on and off too. So where I found that is for everybody playing at home is in this area on the left side where there's like the record, mute, and solo. I can explain those if anybody has any questions about it. There's our effects bin. And then next that's this little drop-down menu, and you can choose to learn a profile or apply a profile. So you have to learn the profile first, and then you apply it, is the way that it works. So if I go to learn, it brings up this guy that I have here. And then when I play a bit of audio, right arrow key, thank you for attending this emergency meeting, our esteemed order, it would learn that bit of audio. Our esteemed order.
So they launched a website.
I think it's because I just put it on. Let me do the right order here. Let's go back. Let's turn all this stuff off. If you ever want to get rid of the effects, you can right click. For those who are doing the trackpad, first off, you may want to get a mouse. Just makes life so much easier. But if not, the 2-finger thing. So there's nothing on. I go to learn profile, and now it's blank. Right arrow key. Thank you for attending this emergency meeting, our esteemed order. So that's what it does. Whenever you play some bit of audio, it analyzes it because you're saying, I want my audio, I want this to be the thing to put on my other stuff at the end. You would go to save as, and then you would save this as your, profile. And then when you're ready to put one on, you would say apply profile. And if you put one on, it just tells you it's on there. And then you have this here, which is your EQ. That's basically how it works. It just saves you the steps of having to go in and do it and all that stuff after the fact.
Can you only learn profile on an original sound, or can you learn it after you've applied the EQ and the compression?
It would then learn the profile with the EQ and compression there, like factored in. One thing to keep in mind is that what you're putting on with the voice profiler is EQ and compression kind of all in one go. So if you already had it, you're sort of already doing it. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah, well, I'm just thinking, but if the file I've originally recorded needs tidying up or cleaning up somehow, too boomy, too much bass, or not enough high end, whatever.
Yeah.
And I fine tune the compression and the EQ to get it how I sound in like. Can I then save that and apply that to all my future recordings?
Yes. Yes. That's the voice profiler would learn that as your processed profile. Yes.
And it wouldn't apply extra stuff on top.
So you would learn, let's say it was this one, and let's just do it. Okay. EQ. And I went, and then, compression, I had to, whatever I was doing, it's on this track. And then I said, learn that profile. Flanked by 3. Thank you for attending this emergency. Thank you for attending this. Okay. And it would be the same process, save it, all of that. And then you would apply it. It would be factoring in. So it would take, I did a terrible one. It should take that sound and make your future recording have that scope.
And do you have to play it, or can you just select the area and it'll learn it super quick?
That is a great question. Play it. Play it for a minute is the simple answer to that. If you actually, yes, you have to play it. Play it for a minute. Let it learn it. Let it learn it for a good solid minute. Let it do its thing. Might as well take a minute. It's actually, this is a tangent, but it's a super complicated thing. What it's doing. And I'm, by the way, not a developer. I work with the developers, but I don't actually do the coding for anybody that's out there coding. But when you sit down and you go through it and such, I mean, what that is doing is pretty amazing. A few of these things are like little bits of witchcraft. To be honest, this new version that's coming out, it's this actually, but where the idea is that if you're so we talked about this, how you can open up this text and it syncs it up, right? If you're a voiceover artist and you're working with scripts, like not scripts, but like video game stuff or other things that comes in like Excel documents and all of that, my voiceover docs. So you get something that looks like, maybe it looks like this. Oh my God, it's taking forever. Sorry. All right, so something like this. Okay, what this is a video game script where column B is the part that you have to narrate. This is what you have to name each file, and you have to, turn in, and then here's the direction for each one of these, bits that you're narrating. So for each one of these, you're going to have to create a separate file, name it this thing, and, have this direction here. And so even though some of these are like a little sentence, some of them are longer, there's that's a lot. It's 274, some spaces, maybe 260 something files. It's a lot of things. It's just a lot there. So we made this, we redid this so that you could open up those Excel documents. So now when you go to open, just like I did before, this isn't out yet, so we'll have to revisit this. But okay, so when you go to open, just like I did before.
When is that out, Jonathan?
Very soon. Out
You
officially.
can show us all this good stuff and then not tell us when it's
I
coming.
know. I promise it'll. But you can, when you click down here in the format, you can. There's a lot of different things. Now you can do Excel, and basically what happens is it takes the. What I was saying, it's like a little bit of magic. Is what it does is it there's like all the stuff that you need for that. You need to have the part that you're doing, the direction, and then remember each one of these has to be separated out as an individual thing with that technical name. And now it does that. So if I was doing this, it's the same exact process. Loot, that's the stuff. Some trinket. I'll take this along, and you can see that it lets you know like what you've done and what you haven't done and all that. There's also very fast one key edits for this, where you just go like this. That's like, because you remember, in this particular case, you only want to give them this. So if you wanted to like cut to the end, it'll cut from wherever you put the playhead to the cursor line there, just by pressing W. Anyway, when you export this, you have this new option called Export Contents. And since you know the process now, it's pretty similar stuff. So you export it. I'll just do it on my desktop for the moment, okay? And then you export it out, and it gives you these. Here's the actual file. Loot. That's where I said loop. But remember, you needed that technical name. It just does it automatically, so you don't have to rename all those 200 files. It just from your point of view, it just says loop. But when you export it, it's got them all, in these technical names. That's a huge time saver right there. So yeah, we think this is kind of going to be a big deal. But anyway, it works the same way. Just as you're doing the export for running it through like the ACX validator. We also, for those folks who work with Findaway voices, Findaway, we love the Findaway people. It's just an alternative to ACX that where you can put your book in different places that aren't Amazon. That's the idea there. These are great questions. So I'm gonna keep going with stuff. All right. So improving the whatever you're doing with this editing, the reason I use this little picture here is that the goal is to be the product you deliver is supposed to have the intimacy of somebody like a grandmother reading to her little kid. If your stuff is filled with things that take you out of the story, it'll do that. So noises, sniffing sounds, like no one wants to hear you sniff in their ear. It's not great. So don't keep that in there. But no one's ever going to listen to an audiobook or any demo or anything and go, oh my God, the editing was so good. There's no such thing. You're just supposed to be proficient at it enough so that you can just deliver a product that it doesn't sound like a bunch of mistakes. That's basically it. So kind of what we talked about, if you only learn like a few things, and I'm happy to go over any more of it, like just know what cutting does, cutting out noises you don't need, maybe pasting over room tone over any noisy sections, not putting in any stuff that's behind you speaking. Again, if I'm doing this while I'm talking, and I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a really loud noise underneath, it's really tough to get that out. You can run it through these filters and stuff, but just better to not put it in the first place. And then timing. You have a natural cadence when you speak. And if you think about it, your book with its sentences is going to have, a certain amount of time. You can actually see how long it is for you just kind of naturally. So when you're editing, let's say I naturally leave a half a second in between my sentences, and then I do an edit and I put 2 seconds of silence or something in there. It definitely sounds not like with the flow. So know yourself. Okay, we talked a little bit about the favorites window and how that works. I want to show you the another one of these, which is the clipboards, which works very similarly. with kind of one big difference. Okay, so again, the favorites window, you can store little clips of audio there. The clipboard works the exact same way, except that it's not there from project to project. Okay, so I'm recording, I'm doing my stuff. I would put audio in and all that into the clipboard. Now, what's the purpose of this? The purpose is, again, the center of the screen here. You can resize these windows however you want to. The purpose is, there are a few of them, but this one especially is great for any type of proper names, character voices, anything you need to keep track of. Again, you're making this demo for eventually making an audiobook, which is long. So the idea is just get used to the process of what it's going to be at the end. So if you have things in a book that might, like a proper name, a character that's in chapter 1 that maybe comes back at chapter 6 or 7 or something, you can keep track of anything that you do by just copying over a little clip, and you can rename it, of course, like a Gary or something. All right. Okay. Whatever it is. Okay. Your different things there. Now,
Jonathan,
yes.
Would that be for the purpose of going back and listening to how you said it before so that you're saying it similarly? Or is that just, what would be because you're not really going to grab that and put it in, right?
Yeah. Yes. Two things with that. One of them is that, so from the point of view of the guy who has to basically produce like all of these different books from all these different, narrators, I'm sure you are all wonderful actors out there, but so I'm not talking about you, but everybody else, your Scottish accent might be great at one point, and it might be greater at another point, but they may not sound the same. And I love when people make mistakes. Like, I love bad accents in movies. And if you ever seen like clips where they cut together, I'm not gonna say which actors or whatever, but like somebody who's really like, it's just not consistent throughout like a movie. A movie is typically an hour and a half long, or an audiobook might be 5 hours long. So it's a good way of just to keep consistent with accents and stuff. Proper nouns is the big one. Leonard Bernstein, Leonard Bernstein. How you said a street name in one chapter comes back in another chapter. And then this thing I'm going to show you in a sec is a special use case that I think is definitely applicable to this one narrator, this amazing narrator who does like really incredible, like little, like voices for little kids books. And she had a book that series, and it was so short books, but book 1, it was like a 3-book series, and there were monsters, and so she had these crazy voices for these different monsters and stuff. And the characters that were in book 1, some of them come back in book 3. So she did this, but the idea is like it would be great if you could just open up or get all the clips from that you made in book 1. So if I did this and I had all these different clips in here, and you could organize these however you want to, whatever, guys, places. I'm just double clicking on this. So, anything you want to keep track of. Okay. You got your stuff. You've filled this up with different clips and things. You also can import any audio that you want to. So if maybe you do have a music project or a project that might have a music track to it or something like that, you can import any file that you want into the clipboard as opposed to the workstation. But you also can import a clipboard itself. So if I made this is a Hindenburg session. This is actually a pro session, to be honest. It's not even narrator, but it's filled with a bunch of clips and such. If I made those clips and put it in a clipboard in a different project, I could import, because one of them is not going to work, but I could import all of the clips that were in there into here. So if that woman with the characters from book 1, she filled up the clipboard, she could just open them up. She's working on book 3, and then she could hear them all. That's to really hear cool. How she did it. Yeah. So that's just a way to kind of like have anything that you want like accessible. Whenever you put stuff in the clipboard, it's saved with that file. You can always access it from any other file. So that's definitely a thing there. By the way, this is a kind of quirky one, but what the heck? So whenever you copy something like this, okay, I just copied this bit of room tone. Sometimes this is good for standardizing things. I don't think this would come up too much in the books that you do, but they're all different. Books can be, or other voiceover products can be all kinds of things. Sometimes I've worked a lot of projects where it was like, you need to have 2 seconds of silence before this thing, or 2 seconds to, the timings were specific for whatever reason, or you just wanted them standardized. Like, let's say it's a cookbook you're working on, right? It's a lot of stuff there. It's pretty different, feeling than a fiction book. But with a cookbook, if you had like, different sections and stuff like that, having it not standardized is a little weird. That's the kind of thing you'd want to have, like, soups, barley, whatever. Okay. So it's kind of nice to have it all sort of standardized. Anytime you copy something, you can then make a space, like, so this thing I copied, this is what I copied. What I selected is a much larger space. Okay. And I'm going to paste it in there, but I'm going to do that with this special way of pasting, which would take that selection and make whatever, it's kind of like our record selection thing. Whatever I've highlighted, I can make the thing I copied exactly. So bigger or smaller. Okay. So let me just, I'll give you an example, but let me just put some stuff here for, just so it looks like we got more going on. Okay. So, I have this thing in here. I can do this special kind of pasting. It's called, we call it replacing. And it just replaces whatever you've selected with the thing you want to go there. That's just good if you ever want to format stuff so it's like exactly the same way every time. Also, if you did have any recurring sections like that, like if this exact thing was going to come up in your book later on, you of course can keep that, anything that you want to for later, and you can just take it and remove it from there and bring it back out too. Just another thing you can do too. So with that, that's clipboards and a lot of the editing, process here. Let's get to some of the stuff that has to do with, so that's how you would do this with pulling audio in. You can paste it. Basically, every little clip in the favorites window or the clipboard, if you right click on it, you can do things with that clip. You can paste it in places or insert it or that kind of thing. Okay, so we did already sort of go over this stuff, like cleaning up the sound. So I'm just going to skip over the before and after, but the effects, we talked a bit about this, noise floor, the voice profiler, how that works. And just remember why they want to have a noise floor. There's a standard there. It's so that it doesn't sound, well, like crap. Okay. And all of the effects, like the noise reduction that we have here, it's one knob that you turn up. Again, there's a lot going on behind that one knob, but the idea is just make it so that you can just turn this up, turn the amount up. And if you run through the validator, it's just going to do that for you. Okay, but remember, the whole goal is to get to getting hired and getting that gig that you want. So after you make your demo and all this, you would do the full book component. Okay, so I just want to briefly touch on like the structure part of it and how that works. Okay, so the idea is that kind of like I said before, your audiobooks can be long, and whoever you're giving it to does not want one big long audio file. So we've looked at exporting for your demo, which is 30 seconds, then exporting your audition, which you saw me pull up that file. I don't know, that would be like, let's say 5 minutes, something like that. Then I get hired for the gig. Well, then I'm going to give a 5-hour, 6-hour, 10-hour file. So if you just go export, it's one big thing. And so if you run it through that validator and you have like a structure for that book, it'll fix all those timings like in between the chapters, and you could do that all beforehand. You just don't want to go through this process and then have it sent back to you. So I'm going to show you a little bit of like customization with this. Okay, so it's the same thing. You just get used to meeting the specs. I'll show you how to deal with this and what some of this stuff is. Okay, some of these things are hidden away a little bit. So I'm going to open up. The way you would do it is the exact same way. So let's say I got hired for that book that I got from the guy, right? And if he gave me a PDF, it would be exactly like the process we looked at before. I would open it up. It would say book. It'd be one big thing. You could also, and I would ask them if they hired me to just get the text file itself. If that happens, you would open it up like a Word document or an EPUB or anything like that. And when the person typed up the book, if they made it with actual structure like chapters and parts, it would look like this a little bit. Okay, and I think Alan's gone, but this is the book that he loves so much.
Jonathan, just to quickly interrupt, there's
Yes.
no way of importing a Kindle file from a Kindle. It has to be
Right. Great question. So the book that I just opened up is an EPUB. It's another type of format. Kindles are also EPUBs, and it would seem like, well, I could just open up the EPUB. You probably can't, and the reason for that is having to do with security. Those files have a proprietary security device so that other things can't read them except for Kindle. So because of that, you can't open it up. Kindle files. If there was a decoder or the actual text of it, in the structure, which is this stuff here, it would work the exact same way, but because of that, you kind of can't. Yeah. So sorry about that, but that's the reason why it's not the actual EPUB. It would open up just fine. It's because there's a security on it. I'll show you how to put in this structure after the fact. I'll show you a couple ways of doing all that stuff. But the idea, just because we're running out of time, I want to get to questions people have. Is the difference between what I opened up and what I've opened up before is just that this one was like a book that somebody gave, and as you can see, you open it up and it has all these things here. So now when I run it through the ACX validator, and this would take a while, and this is a fake version, so it's saying, hey, you didn't narrate any of this stuff, but it would so that's a bad example. It would run it through and it would export it out by the chapters. You also can set it up to do, you could have it do whatever you want, really. So how you would do it is in the file menu, the very last thing is this properties. Okay, and now here there's all types of customization that you can do. And this could get complicated with this stuff here. But I'm just gonna go to this last one here, which is book export. And yours will look like this, and it'll just say audiobook, and it has this stuff where it says split level. What that's referring to is that a book could have different levels of structure. Like you could have a book with chapters and parts. This one actually, that's what it is. It's got chapters and parts. So if you wanted to, you could separate it out by the chapters or just the parts, or however. You also could separate it out by time. Meaning you could type in the time here and it would just separate it out every 90 minutes, or 90 minutes, whatever it was. Every 30 minutes separates out a book, that chunk of audio. Not really the best way to do it because you don't know where that's going to be, really. But the easiest way, the most likely thing you're going to do is just, if it has a structure, you can just have it be like that. Okay. So if I ran this book and we did it for real, through the validator, and I just went through the recording process that I showed, when I exported out all these different chapters, in this case, they're all called months, will just come out. The February chapter will be that's what the audio file is. The March, and so on and so forth. But I want to show you how you would do this if you either read from a physical book or you had a text file that we looked at like before, and how you can add this stuff in. So if you notice up here, there's this thing, which is called the book bar, and this header 1 and header 2 and all that stuff. If you notice here in the contents window, when I put this in, it's putting in that stuff. So that's because that's the structure of the book. So if you wanted to, if your book had 10 chapters, and by the way, all of this, go back some steps here. This stuff here with like header 1, header 2, just means that, again, if there were parts at level 1, or chapters at level 1, and within each chapter had parts, you could add a second level to it. And that's why these all exist. You probably won't do it. In all honesty, you'd probably have 2 at the most. You probably just have 1, which is you just want to give this book out to ACX by the chapters. So let's say we have 10 chapters and we're reading from a physical book. Well, let's do one thing first. Let me just show you how you can customize this a little bit. That's what this styles tab is here. There's some of the stuff won't look exactly like how it looks on yours, but for this header 1, instead of it saying header 1, I could just say chapter. Let me just do chapter. Okay. Chapter. Now every time I click on this, it'll put in the word chapter. Let's just say this is my book. And of course you can just double click on this and call it chapter. Okay. Now when I'm reading, it works the same way. Whenever there's something in the manuscript, as long as I press the right arrow key, so I would just read chapter 1 and then just read my chapter. I'm reading my book, I'm stopping, doing my pickups just like I did before. Chapter 1, and then just read my chapter. Okay, that's all happening. It's just the same exact thing. When I got to the next chapter, chapter 2, if I press the right arrow key, it does just what it did before. It puts a nav point there, and now this goes to these different chapters. That's one way of doing it, okay? If you were reading from a physical book. It's just like, again, we're going to give you a lot of different ways to do it for, we hope, every scenario. If this was like the example where we opened up, this text file with no structure in it, okay? It just looks like this. You have this option of, for any one of these things here, you can change the heading here to, you can insert these things. You can make any of these to be chapters and stuff as well in the, okay, sorry. You can make this chapter. So now if you see over here, it says the Master Charles Chancellor. So any text that you have here, you can also make into different chapters of your book. So at any point, you can kind of build a structure or make a structure. And the only reason to do that is because you don't want to give one big long audio file when you're finally there. And just so you can run it through this validator to kind of make your life easier when the time comes with that. So, that's the idea. I wanted to leave 15 minutes for questions that anybody had, and we're there from the audience. So Emma, if you're around and want to ask people anything that's either come up in the chat or in the Q&A, and then if not, we'll do some more things with Richard, John, and Jane, with them in their sessions and doing that kind of stuff.
Hi, Jonathan. We've had from Andrea, can you play an existing WAV file to teach the profiler to learn your best voice? Or does it need to learn during an actual live recording session?
Great question. The answer is yes. And that's actually what you do. The idea is you put in some audio that you want to learn. So if you had a selection of your voice that you really liked, I'll just do it. I'm going to import some audio in. We haven't looked at that yet, by the way. Well, what is that? Okay. So I'm going to go to import. There is something that comes up a lot. The words open and import is very easy to interchange. They do different things in Hindenburg. So you don't import books, actually. You open books, think, just like opening a book. So when you open up a text file, you go to open. But the reason for import is so you could import in some audio. So let's say I did that, which I'm going to do. I go to import, and I happen to have a clip of audio here. Somewhere here. Okay. Wow. That got weird. Okay. So I've imported in some audio. Let's say you did some other narration, a book, or whatever you did. I then would open up the voice profiler. I go to learn profile. So then what I did was I just clicked on this little drop-down menu, learn profile, and then I would play the
Much easier.
audio.
Here we can see a fairly typical video game script.
By the way, I don't know if you can hear it, my voice here versus I don't know what it sounds like on the other end, but this has been processed and sounds like it, it's all thicker, more lush and all that stuff rather than this. That's because it's been processed actually with a voice profiler. But you would learn it and then save it and then apply the profile to it. So you could do it. The goal is to actually do it kind of this way, not learn it live while you're narrating, meaning it's in red. It's a great question.
What would happen if you learned someone else's profile and applied it to your voice? Would it just sound like really stupid?
I do that all the time because when I go to you can add, I don't think there's any limit to how many profiles you can have. When you go to apply, there's one that comes with it, which is generic. I think for an example, one time, I put on a profile with some like crazy EQ and I had it learn it. And then that's the one that I kept under my name. So I just did it as like an example to show it and then I just sort of kept it. So maybe it's not all that bad, but like it was sort of a mock version of it. So we have a generic one too that comes with the program, and I end up putting that on. If you can see this, just the scope, what it's doing with the EQ is just different than the Jonathan one, the kind of fake one I just opened up. So all it would do is it's just sort of like putting on somebody, like adjusting the EQ in a different way. So if you put on your wife's profile, it might sound fine. But it was made for your wife and not you.
So I can learn Mickey Mouse's profile and make myself sound like Mickey Mouse.
No, it wouldn't. It would just learn like the EQ version. It wouldn't make your voice all the time go meow, meow, meow. It talk like that. It wouldn't do that. It doesn't do any pitch shifting or anything like that. But it might, like in that case, maybe it cuts out a lot of low end because it's a very like high pitched sort of voice. Maybe it would do that.
Nice, Jonathan, just final, and thank you so much for everything. You've been amazing. I mean, talking for 3 hours and explaining it all, you've done an amazing job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
My voice is going.
Well, my final question was, what was the mode button? I think that was the only button we haven't covered.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole thing. It's super cool. It's not so applicable to be, by the way, these lines won't come up on yours. This is for a developer version thing. So I could shut it down and open it again, or you could just ignore it. I say, I should probably shut it down and open it again. Okay. See, I got narrator 2. It's different. All right. What it is let's say I did my book thing like we talked about, right? And you know what? Let's do the whole thing. I'll go to properties, styles. We'll call these parts this time. Okay. So now when I click on this, it'll say part. All right. And I'm going to put a number with the 2. Again, you could also type these in. Arch 1, yeah. Oh, weird. Well, ignore that. That's developer stuff. Art 1 is what it's going to be. Art 1, part 2. This is going to be part 3 and part 4. Okay. What the mode is, there's all, branch, and leaf. Really, you don't need to know about branch. But the practical one is leaf. And basically what leaf does is it allows you to, all is all of it, your whole file. But the leaf, of course, it's like a tree, right? Even when you change it, this little leaf comes up. In the branch mode, it looks like a little branch icon with the leaves on it. So all that means is that if you had let's just talk about leaf mode. In each one of these, I could record in each one of these separately. And then when I put it in all mode, it will all be in order. So you could do this with multiple narrators. If you ever have a project, we do this with audio magazines. You have many different narrators, all the different schedules, all coming in at different times. We'd record the whole thing out of order, but when you put it back in all mode, it's all lined up in the right order. This is one of those rare times where it actually makes more sense to turn pre-roll off, because you would end up hearing pre-roll of somebody that's not you, for example. But I'll just show you. So here we are. I'm going to record this. Promise. This is me recording part 2. Okay. Now, if I click on part 3 or part 1, you don't see any audio because it's only in the leaf, only in part 2. This is me recording part 4. There's no audio in 3. There's no audio in 1. There's some in 2. There's some in 4. Let's do 3. This is me recording part 3. This is me recording part 1. So they're all separated out, right? When I go back to all, they're all there in order. This is me recording part 1. This is me recording part 2. This is me recording part 3. This is me recording part 4. Okay, so that's what the mode is. And all branch is a way to have, if you did have something with level 1, 2, or really complicated files, it's a way to have the branches separated out. Probably never, ever, ever use that, in all honesty. This is super cool. I don't know how practical it is for folks making demos, in all honesty, but just so you know it's there. It's a pretty amazing thing organizationally. Also really good if you ever are in the position of having to, remember you could import stuff into any of these too and have them all sync up. So if you ever wanted to, it's a good way to actually kind of create a little demo reel and stuff too, if you wanted to. Great question. That's what the mode does. So if anybody has any other questions, I say we have at it, but if not,
Jonathan, we have a couple. Sorry. Rebecca said, if Findaway wants raw audio for the audition and chapters, the export you have set up for them, is it still considered raw?
Yeah. So if anybody that wants raw audio, no process, it just means no processing done to it. I would not run it through any of these validators. I wouldn't do this at all. I would not put any effects on. I would just go to export. It will export the raw audio. And again, if you only wanted to export the clip, a certain thing, just highlight it. And if you right click, you can export the selection, just that one area, but just export with nothing on it. That's raw audio.
And last question from Andrea, in preferences in advance, there is a delete automatically that was checked off in Jonathan's version. Should we have this box checked? Also, what is cue point?
Don't worry about the cue point thing. It's okay. It's a good question. A cue point. All right. This is a marker. I promise. A marker marks place in the file. It doesn't affect the sound. It's just a way to keep notes to yourself. and it's on the timeline. You can move it around, but if I move these clips around, it doesn't really affect the markers in any way because they're on the timeline. It's what you'd put in there to leave a note for yourself that you have to come back here because you made a mistake, okay? And all that stuff. A cue point is like a marker, except it stays with this audio region. Okay, it's much, you're not going to really use an audiobook production, in all honesty, probably likely, but it's a way to have a marker basically go along with the cue point with the region if you were moving it around. It's much more applicable to pro and podcasts and stuff. You'd put a cue point on a region because you know right when this happens, that's when you want your music cue to be or something like that. Again, you could do it with audiobooks, so it's there. This so that's what that is. That's the difference between those things. This cue point filter thing that's here is some super irrelevant thing that's for libraries, and don't worry about it at all. Delete files after undo. Okay, the way Hindenburg works and most DAWs work in terms of how it saves files and such. Let's just look at my Hindenburg folder here. Where did I do? Okay. Here's Hindenburg sessions. For each one of these sessions, this is the actual Hindenburg session. It has a files folder with all of the bits of audio that are in there. Okay. That's the way that works. So every time you make a new, that files folder is where all the kind of raw audio is housed, and it looks in there to put it in the file, is basically how it works. What this says, delete files after undo, is, remember, I did a lot of like undoing and redoing and stuff. So if I undid a bunch of stuff and I don't want it, and I want it, but when I save this, I would say, don't take that stuff. Just discard the stuff that I undid. If you wanted to keep everything there for a reference point, because maybe as if, or maybe you want to be extra safe, something like that, you could uncheck that so that anything you ever recorded, even in the stuff that you undo, will go into that files folder if you ever had to reference it or take it out or anything like that. But it will make that grow larger and larger and larger because audio files take up a lot of space. So that's what it is. Good question.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's been absolutely amazing. And thank you to all our panelists and guests. You've been awesome.
Yes.
And if anyone wants to share on social media, I've popped the handles in the chat there. And if anyone wants to stick around for a quick video testimonial, we can do that too. But I know it's late for some people. It's sort of 9 o'clock here in the UK. So that's entirely up to you. But thank you again, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
For your great questions.
I just want to put one thing in the chat that's if anybody wants to hear all those links to the videos and all that stuff. Okay. I think that was already put in there, but we'll just do it again. Give me one sec and I will do it. I promise. Okay. So there's that stuff. Links to all those videos. If it, we'll go over all the stuff I covered. But thank you so much to the VoiceOver Network. Hopefully this made answered some questions and made everybody's lives a little easier with getting demos out the door. That's the goal. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay.
Amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.